We'll do questions towards the end. We should be live any moment now. Let me go check on YouTube.
Oh, yeah.
And
I don't see the...
mute
I don't know how
it.
to even get to the YouTube now.
Oh, really?
I don't have a... Well, I mean, I could figure it out, I guess.
Oh,
I just don't have a Twitter, so...
Yeah, we're live. We're live. James Lindsay's live.
I'm live.
How are you? Living
I'm okay, thank you.
live,
How
Lindsay?
are you?
I'm good. How is your 2022 turn out to be?
It's been busy, man. It has been really busy. I'm trying to find us on the YouTube right now so I can follow along with the chat. So it's been busy, though. I actually have traveled more this year, like already, like double what I traveled last year. And last year I traveled ridiculously. Is this thing that's live now?
Have you been
Probably
counting
so.
your miles?
Yeah, it is. Okay, hang on. Now I gotta figure out how to mute this tab before I lose my.
Yeah.
Okay.
Oh, let me ask the chat.
Okay, thank God. Now we're in business.
Sound. Hey, chat, let us know how our sound is, if our levels are
having
equal.
Technical difficulties, but not anymore. Difficulties. Yeah, so 2022 has been busy. It's, hard not to black pill in 2022. I don't know if you've noticed that, things are crazy. The regime is going for broke or something.
Yeah, they have nothing else to stop them, right?
Yeah, so here we are, I feel like we've made some headway. I actually seriously do feel like, and I don't know how much of it's because of stuff like what we're doing or people are doing, and how much of it's just that they're hopeless, but the regime seems to be panicking a bit. And one hint that I have of that is, I guess everybody saw the video that went around, like, of Bill Gates like a week ago or so, where he was like, this financial crap isn't going to work. He's like, you can't just like move numbers around on a balance sheet. Who's going to make steel? Who's going to make cement? He's like, got his hole. He's panicking. He's like, do you have something secret in your desk drawer that's going to make steel with your financial sheets? And it's like, no, you don't. And so it's like something funny's going on. If he's all of a sudden kind of getting out of lockstep a little bit, something funny's going on.
Well, that's the top down, but you're doing bottom up. Sorry, what'd you say?
I said ESG is on the rocks. We're targeting social emotional learning in the schools. I think we're finally targeting the stuff that matters. So it's a good year, honestly. A lot of people are stressed. It's black pill season, but it's a good year if you kind of take a step back and realize, what you can't do is compare 2022 to what you hoped 2022 would be like in Fantasyland. You have to compare 2022 as it is to what 2022 would have been had people not started speaking up and had people not started, pointing out and digging into the actual causes of things.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I asked you how many miles you've traveled, but what I really want to know is your carbon footprint.
Oh, let me see if it tells me on my app. I'll open it. So I don't know how many miles I've traveled for sure this year. I know how many miles I've traveled total once I type in my password, which is, just kidding. I've probably traveled about half of these this year, actually. It says that my lifetime flight miles, I just crossed a milestone on my last trip. It is 301,404 miles. So I've traveled a few miles. I have a lot of, what do you call them? Frequent flyer miles. I have like about 700,000 of them stocked up in my account. Yeah.
Has this all been
Where's the carbon footprint? That's what I was looking for, right?
In America or international?
This has all been in America. I mean, some of those lifetime flight miles were my old trips to China and Europe and things like that from years and years ago.
But I mean, 2022.
I haven't left the United States since the end of 2019. So this has almost all been crazy amounts of back and forth domestic travel. And I don't know how to tell you how much if they are tracking I know they are tracking my CO2. It's not on here in an easy to find way. So that's good news.
Schwab will come down. He'll send you the receipt.
Yeah. So my carbon footprint is still less than anybody who flies on a private jet.
Less than what? Not Taylor Lorenz, the other Taylor. Big Taylor. What's her name?
Taylor
Swift. Yeah.
Squad
Less than
goals.
Taylor. Yeah. We
Okay.
got the goals. Okay.
Okay.
So,
So
yeah.
how was your 2022? Because we haven't spoken. Have we spoken in a stream like this year
I think we did something in spring,
in spring?
but it's been a long time. It's been a
It
long
has
time.
been a long time. Well, I've been busy. I'm gone.
You,
Like right now, because Dr. Phil, I was supposed to be on Dr. Phil yesterday. I was supposed to fly home from Los Angeles today. Dr. Phil, I was already in Los Angeles, and Dr. Phil texted me, well, not him, his people, texted me and canceled on me at short notice. They didn't explain why. All they said was, we've rearranged. We don't need you at this time. And I texted back and I said, I already flew to California. And they did not answer me and have not replied.
Oh, so they really ghosted you.
I don't know. I mean, I haven't contacted my contact yet and said, P.S., this was super unprofessional. Like, I literally was already in California. Luckily, I had to be in California for another reason. So it wasn't like I flew out there for getting stood up. I had another conference. But what I had to do was change my flight and then change my flight back. So they actually incurred not only stress, but financial hardship upon me that I have a feeling I will not get remunerated for.
Hardship. Is that, sorry, little off topic. Is that like a pumpkin spice beer? Is that what you're drinking?
No, this is some kind of a very overcooked double IPA that I picked up because I wanted something that seemed like it would be refreshing, and it looks pretty on the can. And it says DIPA, and I was like, what the hell's a DIPA? And I'm like, oh, double IPA. And it really, those first couple of mouthfuls, that was number one. Like, holy shit, there's a lot of hops in this.
A lot of hops.
So that's a can full of growing your boobs is what it is.
Oh, wow. Estra-tastic.
I mean, there's your phytoestrogen story of the hour. Hops. You should look into that.
The moobs of Lindsay.
Not anymore, really. I started doing that cold plunging.
Wait, is this like this like Tide Pod thing? Is this one of those TikTok
no, there's
challenges?
no Tide involved. There's just cold water and my butt in it every day.
Okay.
Yeah.
Just your butt? Just like a shallow pan?
No, that would be a sitz bath. No. I'm up to my neck or my chin or whatever. And it's pretty cold. So that's my new thing. I do the Wim Hof breathing while I'm in there.
Okay.
And,
did you like dig a hole in your backyard with
no,
like
I bought
refrigerator?
a tub.
Okay, so it's a specialty tub.
Yes, it's actually a tub. You know what a hot tub is? Imagine that, but cold.
Okay. It's just like ice, like being tossed at your nipples, just like
not quite that cold.
Okay.
The coldest I got in it so far is 47, which, by the way, is cold.
All right. Okay.
I was in that for like 10 minutes. That's pretty damn cold.
So it shrinks your moobs and your junk.
It shrinks everything.
Everything just gets.
Yeah.
What's the health benefit of this? Is like purifying the bloodstream?
Oh God, that's supposed to be off the charts. I don't know. There are experts in this. Joe Rogan does it, so it's obviously good for you because everything Joe Rogan does is good for you. Like, you know, whatever Joe Rogan does. No, it's like supposed to be good for your immune system. It's supposed to be good for your catecholamines. It's supposed to be good for, therefore, mental clarity and focus, motivation, all kinds of crap. All kinds of crap. Heart rate variability is a big one.
One of our like things that we do when we speak is like your stress levels. So does this decrease your stress levels?
Yeah, kind of. I think so. It's hard to say because there's a confounded variable here, which is the confounded variable of doing the Wim Hof breathing, which drops your stress level basically to zero. And so you do the breathing exercises while you're in the cold water. And so I don't know for sure which one.
Can you give an example, or is this like a 20-minute like long?
I mean, it takes a few minutes. I can tell you what you do. There's a video. There's a whole bunch of. It's in like every language on earth.
Wim Hof.
He's got him on his Wim Hof. WIMHOF. Okay. So this guy's got this. He's the Iceman, and so this guy runs marathons in shorts and no shoes in the snow because of his stupid breathing exercises. They're amazing. And they are profound in terms of how much they calm you down or relax you. Like when you finish doing the thing on the beginner exercise on the YouTube, if you actually do it, I swear to God, you don't give a shit what happens next. You're totally chilled out. Like you don't care if you breathe anymore. Like you literally just, okay, so what you do is you breathe in and out, and it's got a name like holotropic breathing or something. You breathe in and out deeply and relatively quickly, but not like huff and puff. 30 breaths should take about a minute and a half, a little over a minute and a half to do the 30 breaths. So I don't want to do that because it's kind of stupid. But you breathe in deep, you breathe out, you breathe in deep, breathe out, breathe in deep, breathe out. 30 times, no pause. You don't breathe in and hold it, breathe out and hold. You just 30 deep, quick breaths, but not like huff and puff breaths. There are other exercises that I think use faster breaths. I just got the app. I don't know. I haven't started digging into that. I'm happy with what's on the YouTube for free. And so anyway, when you breathe out on number 30, right?
Yeah.
You breathe all the way out and you stop. You do not breathe back in. And then you wait. And so the first round on the YouTube video, you breathe out for 30 seconds. You breathe out and you keep your breath out for 30 seconds. Then you take a deep breath, hold it for 15 seconds, relax, breathe out. Round number 2, do it exactly the same. Okay? Except this time you hold your breath out for 60 seconds. And then the third time you hold your breath out for 90 seconds.
Oh.
By the way, that's a long time to not breathe.
That's a long time.
That's a long time to not breathe with your breath out in particular. But for a while back in the spring, I was doing it like pretty seriously. And I was doing it like every day. And I wasn't just doing 3 rounds. And usually I don't. I usually do 5 or 6. And I just kind of like back the video up and do the last round over and over again. But then he says, if you want to prolong your breath hold, pause the video and continue. And so I'm, okay, I don't. I just back it up so I can keep a timer going. And I just keep clicking backwards and letting it go in like a little circle. And one time last spring, I was like 6 minutes plus. And it's like I think it's because you're hyperoxygenating yourself. But then I got kind of like, I think that was bad for me. And so like I kind of like backed off from the whole project. That was also,
did you like start seeing visions like ayahuasca stuff?
It was like an hour bad for you. It every day.
Yeah.
It's profound. So anyway, it turns out you do it in the cold water and you no longer are tense in the cold water. You relax. That's what it's supposed to do. And then once you relax in the cold water, turns out it's not that cold. It's like it's way more bearable once you relax.
Yeah.
And somebody in the chat asked if it fights communism. And yes, mental clarity is required for fighting communism. And so is something that breaks you out of your freaking head. And let me tell you what, cold water will break you out of your head. Any cycle going on in your head ends. You get your butt and twig and berries in cold water.
Mm-hmm.
When your moobs go down under the cold water, your chin goes into the cold water, you kind of forget about everything except that the water's really cold.
I don't necessarily want to psychoanalyze Marxism, but you said something interesting there about breaking out of your head is how you get out of it. Is it like just because it's such a mental, like, are you fighting mentally against this process that we call Marxism or communism?
I mean, I'm not really. I mean, I just kind of understand it. It's just frustrating to see it everywhere. And so you start getting in these, I think a lot of us kind of get black-pilled because we get into these cycles of thinking, oh my God, they're doing this. And literally, maybe it's just me because I'm a magnet for bad news now. But I wake up every day with like 100 even without Twitter, I wake up with like 100 examples, right, in my email or my DMs or on Instagram instead of the Bird app that doesn't exist anymore. And I have all these examples of terrible things that are going on. Oh, they're doing this. Oh, they're doing that. They're implementing this. They're installing that. And it's enough to stress a guy out. Turns out the cold water reset. You get out of the cold water, you've had a great reset of your brain, you're ready to do other things. And then what I normally do when I get out of the cold water, you know what the best way to warm up after you get out of cold water is?
A Snickers?
Incorrect. It is exercise. Snickers relates to exercise because sugar. But no, it turns out that it is exercise. And so then I'm making excuses to work out every day, getting out of the cold water. You have to start slow, you'll hurt your tendons, but then start working out a little bit, get the fitness going, get the circulation back up. Takes about 10 minutes, get your 15 minutes, get your blood going again. Then you start sweating, et cetera. And then you're good to go. So this turns out to be really good for not being crazy. Yeah, for really getting out of your head and getting back into your body, the whole, thing. Anyway, so this is my routine.
Sounds like a good one.
It's not bad. I really like the cold water. Wim Hof says by day 6, you'll crave the ice. And I remember laughing at that, thinking that's ridiculous. And it's actually true. I don't know if it takes even 6 days. Usually I kind of have a resistance to getting into the cold water the first time I do it in any given day. And then all I want to do is get back in the cold water all day long afterwards.
Sounds kind of addicting, but without a chemical other than just like cold water, which I guess is technically a chemical. But
yeah, well, apparently it causes your norepinephrine to go up by like 500%. So that's a chemical.
Norepinephrine? What is that?
Norepinephrine. It
Does that
is
help
also known
with
as
like hair
noradrenaline.
sheen?
It is
Okay.
one of your adrenal hormones.
All right. Okay. So it's kind of like a stress hormone, but not, or you kind
Well,
of like,
yeah,
it's
it
like a
is a stress
challenge
hormone, but it
hormone.
makes your brain like super, super, super clear. And I think that the big mental benefit of this, though, is that you're putting yourself in a very, let's use technical terminology, a very sympathetic nervous system situation. You descend into cold water. This is your sympathetic nervous system kicks in. You start breathing hard. Your heart starts pounding. Your norepinephrine shoots through the roof. Stress hormone, blah, blah, blah. Right. And then what do? You master that stress in the stressful environment and you calm down. And then you're so much calmer afterwards.
Hmm.
I'm
Okay.
also telling you, like, if you're ruminating or whatever, you get out in the forest, go engage in social rituals. We should talk about that. That's a thing people are forgetting to do. But cold water will shock you right out of your damn head. It's
Uh,
really hard to be like caught in a loop of thought and
yeah.
that's bugging you and then get in cold water and then remember 20 minutes later after you've been sitting in cold water for 15 or 20 minutes that it mattered.
How big is your tub? Is it enough for a social ritual, or is it just a single
I don't
use?
think that's a good idea. It's like a giant bathtub.
Okay. So
It's not as
two
big
or
as a
three
hot
people.
tub, and it doesn't
Yeah.
have seats. It technically, I think you could put two people in it, but you'd have to really like be careful not to splash the water everywhere, and you'd be kicking each other if you wanted to be descent. If you wanted to just sit up in it to where like, it cuts at your bottom of your ribs or whatever, then that you could put two people in it. But if you wanted to like actually submerge to your neck, it's going to be a little weird
Okay. I
at
mean,
best.
yeah,
It's like a
you'd have
big
to be in a
bathtub. It's literally
polycool
just a big bathtub with a
to fit
cooler,
one.
and it turns out mine also has a heater.
Oh, wait, what the cooler is just like, so it's just like these little spritzes of cold water, just like,
No, it has jets in it like a hot tub, and the jets spray
but it's
cold
just
water instead of
cold.
hot
That's
water.
fascinating.
It's not that complicated.
No, I mean, yeah, no, I mean, not with modern technology. Comparatively, it's not. I just want to say to chat that we will get to the super chats later on after we get into the flow, but I would like to hear about this social ritual kick that you're on.
Okay, I'm not on a kick. I just think about it sometimes. Think about these young people. They don't go out in the world. They're scared of the world because they have their phone and they're playing on their phone. And they order their shit on the phone and they buy everything on the phone and they text on the phone and they don't talk to people in the face-to-face modes. And I remember reading a thing where I was mentioning this in the context of rumination. So does everybody know what rumination is? Rumination is when you start chewing on something, you can't get out of your head, you get in your head, you're in a bad mood when you're ruminating and it's just kind of going in a cycle. And there's
Hmm.
different ways you can break up rumination. Some people who are not me can go exercise their way out of rumination. I can't do it. It doesn't work for me. Walking in nature with lots of greenery apparently breaks open the rumination pattern and then you can get out of it. This is kind of well known. But one of the things that actually gets people out of rumination, and it's also pro-social, is that you go into public. Let's say you go to the grocery store. It doesn't have to be anything like special. You go to the grocery store and you don't have self-checkout. Okay, pretend you don't have self-checkout. So you get a couple things and you get your milk, you get your eggs, you get your, bananas, whatever it is. You go up and you go to pay for them, and then there's somebody standing there. And what do they say? Hey, how are you? Did you find everything you need? And you, whether you like to or not, you have to say, I'm good. That's probably a lie. And yeah, I found what I was looking for. Turns out that little exchange of pleasantries snaps you out of your head. And every time you have to do that, somebody's walking by, you're at the mall or you're out in the, public or whatever, and somebody walks by and they wave and say, hi, how are you? And you say, good, how are you? That snaps you out of your head just a little bit every single time. Plus, even though you're not making a real connection with somebody else, you're actually like engaging with another person. And it gets you more and more and more out of your head, which is why these freaking devices and the perpetual parasocial relationships that they foster and engender are probably net bad in a big way that contribute to a lot of the net bads that we're actually all dealing with.
Hmm.
So I really do think we should be encouraging people getting together in person, connecting analog, even if it's just the little pleasantries. Make yourself go through the normal checkout instead of the self-checkout at the grocery store.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
get it. If you're in a hurry, it's like you don't have to do this. But forcing yourself to have interaction, pleasant, social interaction with strangers turns out probably to be good for you. And it's something that used to be required to participate in social and civic life.
Hmm.
And it is not really required now because this is why I was thinking about it. This is what got it in my head the other day. I was at the airport. I'm at airports a lot, but
Yeah.
I like to eat as some people do. And so I was at the airport in Houston where I actually am a lot. I ran into a guy at the airport one time, and he said, "I didn't think I would see you here." And I'm like, "There's nowhere on earth that I am more than this. What are you talking about? I'm here like 3 times a week." Um, but anyway, I was in Houston, and in Houston now at almost all the restaurants, not the fast food places, but almost all the like actual kind of sit down restaurants, they don't come to your table and like take your order and that whole little ritual. There's a fucking iPad on your table, and you have to like, you're supposed to scan a QR code to be able to pay from your phone, blah, 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 right? No, you at no point do you ever in any significant way interact with anybody. You choose your food, you push the button, you wait, somebody brings it and sets it down in front of you. They confirm that they're setting the right thing in front of you, and then they go away. And then there's no end interaction. There's no interactions. And you've interacted with a friggin' iPad, right? And so it's convenient. It's actually saved my ass in Houston because you've already paid for your meal and tipped before you even get your meal. And one time I had a delayed flight, so I was like, I'm going to get a nicer, I'm going to slow down and have an actual meal here, right? And I sat down, and I'm about halfway through my food, which I've already paid for on the friggin' iPad, and it was like, we have undelayed your flight. And I'm like, oh shit, I have to be across the airport in like 4 minutes now. So it worked out to be convenient at one point. But the fact of the matter is, you used to have to, if you wanted to get food in public, you had to talk to somebody. Like actually speaking with somebody for a minute or two was a requirement. It's no longer a requirement. I don't think that this is a direction, as much as it feels like convenience. I don't think this is a direction we should really want to go. I don't think that living inside of our head, connected to other people primarily only through devices that create parasocial relationship and activity, is the way that we really need to go in life. I'm thinking about this a lot because I'm in these friggin' airports looking at these iPads all the time. Also, I'm like, what the fuck data are they tracking off of my phone when I scan that QR code? Yeah. And it's like, I'm using my credit card. What's going on here? It's like, I don't trust any of this shit now.
One wonders if communism, or what we call communism, what you referred to as communism earlier, this huge systemic ideology that's organizing society in a particular direction, if that is accelerated by the fact that we are more and more disconnected from other people's human experience. And so ideas like CRT, SEL, ESG are infectious because we're already thinking in our daily living, or we're already not thinking of human beings as other human beings. We're thinking of them
my
as
belief
just
is that
exchange.
It's like communism and Marxist theory says that their goal is to humanize the world and that everybody's alienated, blah, blah, blah. But I just think the whole thing's an inversion of reality, and the iron law of woke projection always applies at this point. So, in fact, I think that it's all about alienating people from each other and dehumanizing them in order to achieve political agendas and goals. So
what I'm saying, I'm tying that to, the daily life is that we are disconnected more and more. So those ideas actually make more sense. They actually describe the world rather than change the world.
Communism might work if humans were only abstract instead of real.
Yeah.
And if you're only interacting with people through your phone or kind of in this virtual or depersonalized sense, then people are really just kind of abstract. They're just abstractions. They don't have lives. They don't have feelings. They don't have anything. They have the concept of feelings. They don't have feelings. The thing that your iPad has nothing. It's the most faceless, while with a camera probably watching you take everybody your food, faceless thing in the entire universe. And as for the communism in general, that's probably true. As for what's happening right now with what we can only call neo-communism in the very specific, this is it. I mean, the goal is to use they've used different words throughout their history, technocratic, but through technotronic. They used to use that word a lot, technotronic control, which is techno-electronic, I think. I have no friggin' idea even what that word where that comes from.
It's kind of dated.
But the idea is it's like that you're going to interface with your iPad. You're going to interface with the metaverse. I worry about that. I worry about, like, how are they going to get people on that thing? Does anybody who wants to be in the metaverse? I don't know anybody who wants to be in the metaverse.
With the visor,
with the goggles.
Yeah, no.
Yeah, nobody. So what are they going to do? How are they going to get people in it? Well, they're going to put school in the metaverse. That's how they're going to make kids get in it. So then they have an account 7-8 hours a day. They're plugged into their freaking goggles. Then it's like, why are they actually at school? They have their goggles. They don't need to be there. Now they're just locked in their bedroom with freaking goggles on their face 7, 8 hours a day, pretending they're in ancient Rome, but it's not really ancient Rome. It's what
Hmm.
Mark Zuckerberg programmed ancient Rome to be. And pretending they're on the moon. I saw an advertisement for this earlier. You don't have to tell the kids about the moon. You can take them to the moon in the metaverse and they can walk
Hmm.
around on the moon. No, they can't. That's what some goon programmed the moon to be like.
Hmm.
It's not the same thing. And then the same thing, but then you got to think about it. Okay, they can make the kid believe that you're in ancient Rome. You can make the kid believe he's on the moon. You can make the kid believe whatever, blah, blah. Okay, so what when that happens when the kid's a little shit? What do you do with him then? Do you put him in a gulag? Do you put him in a prison? Do you wheel him back to like a concentration camp for like 2 hours to punish him? If you can import one experience, why can't you import a different experience? And it's like, I don't like the look of this. I also think, speaking of what we're talking about with those iPads, I suspect the cash registers are going to move into the metaverse. I
I
suspect cash registers are going to exist in some augmented reality. The cash register is not there. You go to the Starbucks, you want to get a coffee. There's no way to pay. You want to get a coffee, you better log into your friggin' metaverse account, and there is a fake imaginary cash register, and you can scan your fake imaginary digital hand that's connected to the digital ID connected to your profile to take your CBD credits out of your hand, or out of your account, central bank digital currency control credits,
yeah.
your coupon money that you buy by providing data to the regime, and that the data becomes the basis of the currency, because this debt currency is not working so good right now, and the gold currency is not there anymore. So now what we have, your data becomes the basis for the currency next. Why? Because if you give them the data, you're providing them with something of value, so they can give you a universal basic income or beyond that in fake money, digital currency, because your data enables them to market to you better, to predict you better, to control you better. And then you think, wow, James, you doing a full blown crazy talk. Except that that's from a 2019 paper written by a critical theorist criticizing the direction, written by a leftist, criticizing the direction that what he calls psychodata is going. The relentless gathering of data, and what the purpose is that entities like the United Nations, the OECD, World Economic Forum, Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, Chan Zuckerberg Initiative, Templeton Foundation, World Bank. He names a lot of them. He doesn't name the CCP,
Well,
but a
what's
lot of
his
these
critique
organizations.
then, or his counter to it then, as a leftist, from the leftist point of view?
Well,
What
it's
does he
like
want?
his complaint. It's really weird to read that paper. And like I said, it's called Psychodata. The author is Ben Williamson, if anybody wants to look it up. Um, it's a very weird critique. It's kind of like he's saying this is exactly what we want, but we don't want the wrong people to be in control of it. And these people happen to be the wrong people. But if we could get the right people in control of it, we could use it for other purposes. He's not real explicit about that, though.
Hmm.
But it's very clear
Hmm.
that he doesn't like the direction that it's going, and he's warning about it. But he says that the point of all this data gathering is very explicitly clear. It's to make perfectly forecastable economic units out of people and perfectly controllable political units out of people. I even saw a thing on the World Economic Forum video the other day where it was like, oh yeah, when we need to speed up the economy, we can speed it up. When we need to slow down the economy, we can slow it down. That way you don't get boom and bust cycles. They can just control the speed of the economy by conditioning what everybody's going to do.
Isn't
Um,
that desirable, though? To be able to have some
uh,
sort of lever on that to stop a crash or to
okay,
deflate a
so
bubble?
here's where they get you, and they just got you. Isn't that desirable because we need some sort of lever? Do you see? You're what I don't know that you actually agree with it. That you're just asking a prompting question, but the question: should we think about something that can provide that function, and do we want that? Those are two different questions. I do not want that. It might be good that we do have something that can perform functions like that in an effective way that doesn't actually work through turning our money into a voucher system that they can control what we can spend it on, when we can spend it, to massively curtail freedom, right? That they can slow down the economy by, like right now, they try to monkey around with interest rates and things like that to do this. But they can slow down or speed up the economy by making it so, well, we need the economy to be slower, so you can only use up to 10% of your money for the next 60 days. Not as good.
Mm-hmm.
We don't want that. We don't want that. It's the same thing. So many of our things in life in the past 30, 40 years have been about this. We're all sacrificing the ability to have any risk whatsoever, that anything bad might happen, by turning life into this nerfed version where nobody's happy, nothing's ever interesting, and in fact, people that we should not have given control over us have control over us. Like, for example, don't you want something that stops terrorists? Yes, we do want things that stop terrorists. Do we want the Patriot Act that allows the NSA to spy on every American? No, we don't. As a matter of fact, we don't. So do we want something that can possibly work into that kind of a function? Probably. And it seems like something that we should have a say in helping to develop what that would look like. Do we want that? No, we do not want that. And this is so often what's going on. We need to do something. This is something. Let's do it. And the right and left, this is something people do. This isn't a political thing. The left is really good at manipulating it. The right is really good at falling face first into a fucking hole with it. Like, I know, let's set up a state church and get a king. Fuck. Seriously? We need to do something to stop the woke. Having a king is something. Let's do that. Dive face first into a hole full of dog shit. These people are stupid. So should there be something? Yeah, let's talk about it. Should it be that? Bad idea. Bad idea, bro chacho. Klaus Schwab in charge of how much money you can spend on what and when he's talking about how in the future you're going to eat the bugs and be happy? No, I don't think so. I'm not going to eat fucking crickets, Klaus.
Okay, well, but while the marketplace of ideas is talking about it, people are actually doing things. People are actually instantiating things. And I bring that up because I want to kind of trace our discussions from talking about the theory, postmodernism, CRT. We've gone through all the theory, and you've gone through all the theory. You've processed the theory. You've written books and papers about the theory, and now you're trying to instantiate. You're trying to do something. You're trying to cross that Rubicon from, I know that's the wrong term, but going from the virtual, well, maybe you do. You're trying to go from just thinking and talking about it into doing things. And how does doing things work? How do you choose what to do?
Okay,
and
so
how has what you've done or been involved in done anything?
All right, let's say that your kitchen's on fire, right? It's just started. It's not like in a total conflagration, but a fire has started in your kitchen. So now you have a problem, right? And you've got to do something about it, right? It would behoove you to stop for a quarter second. You see the flames, you see the smoke, you see the danger, you panic, you're freaking out. It would behoove you for a quarter second to recognize the nature of the problem that you're dealing with before you take action. For example, is it an electrical fire? There are things you do and don't do with an electrical fire. Is it a grease fire? You ever watch those videos of somebody that's like they throw the bucket of water on a grease fire and then their kitchen explodes and it's like all over their face and it's like they've sprayed themselves with napalm?
Yeah.
Or is it, kind of a traditional little fire? Did the towel or whatever, like the kitchen towel, dip into the burner and catch on fire? That's a normal fire. You dump water on that, it's going to go out. That's the right thing to do. You dump water on a grease fire, it's going to explode. You're in a bad place. You dump water onto an electrical fire, I don't know, that's got to be a bad idea. So there are correct things to do based on the circumstances, which means you have to properly understand the situation that you're in, and then you have to act from there. As I've quoted like a billion times from the book Political Ponerology, he claims it's a Polish proverb. Is it Lobachevsky that wrote that? I don't remember. Anyway, he writes this. He says, never attempt to cure that which you don't understand, because you probably make it worse, right? And so in the situation that we're in right now, and people are like, we got to do something, we got to do something, we got to do something. I don't think this requires knowing what stage we're at in the war, the issue, the fight, whatever we want to call it. You have to know what's happening, and you have to know where we are. People are all the time, I don't want to deal with people who don't know what time it is. Well, you better know what time it is. You know what time it isn't? It's not time to do something reactionary. What you actually need to do is you need to recognize the circumstances that we're in. So what do I think the circumstances that we're in happen to be? I think that the world is being run by a cartel. I think that we have a financial cartel. I think that we should be taking direct action to deal with the cartel. We can start talking about goofy cultural crap and we can start talking about other things after we deal with the cartel and start to see what liberation from the cartel looks like in terms of behaviors. So let's say just imaginary, now we're in conceptual, possibility space, that we defeat the cartel. The ESG cartel is over. BlackRock and Larry Fink are put to the point with laws and they can't keep going because it's considered trust or conspiracy or whatever they get busted for. We're a year down the track. Do some of the universities start to experiment with not having a DEI or a ESG or a SDG program? Do some start to do that? Well, in that case, now we're going to have an open market, and it behooves us to see what they're going to do with it rather than putting down some hammer and fist law saying, no, you're going to teach the true, the good, and the beautiful according to parentheses, according to our view of the true, the good, and beautiful. Because guess what? The communists think they're teaching the true, the good, and the beautiful too. They think that the true is that humans are a fundamentally perfectly social communist species. The good is achieving that in reality so that oppression is ended. And the beautiful is what you are able to create and produce with your work when you are freed from the necessity of working for somebody else or to feed a hungry belly. Marx says that explicitly, that that's what true, good, and beautiful boil down to. So you can't say we're going to put down this law and say we're going to teach the true, the good, and the beautiful, and everything's going to get back. We're going to use a classical education. Herbert Marcuse was a classicist. Herbert Marcuse would have, if you told Herbert Marcuse, you have to do a classical education, we'd all be studying Plato. We'd all be learning the pederasty of Timaeus, and we'd all be learning to organize society according to the Republic, which is literally, well, Marcuse is a gold person, and then his guard of, I guess, black liberationists are going to be the silver people, and everybody else are the base metal people that have to be basically the workers to keep it up, except for all of you deplorables who are the mud people down beneath the pyramid of society, and you're going to have an absolute tyranny. So this isn't good enough. This isn't good enough. You actually have to understand the situation. You have to understand the provocations. You have to understand what time it is. And I think that the time, so I've already told you what it is. We have a cartel. I think that the time is raising awareness, making eyes open. The cartel, it's very difficult to beat a cartel. Cartels beat themselves when the conditions become right and when law enforcement can do something. We don't have law enforcement on our side right now, but we do have the possibility of a lot of angry people. A lot of angry people create a lot of pressure. Now, what is the cartel filled with? How does it work? Is it because Klaus Schwab and like 40 guys in Davos or 300 guys in Davos said, this is the way we are going to do things, and that everybody just goes along with it? No. It's because there's a whole bunch of people at layer after layer after layer after layer under him that are strivers. They don't care what the system is, so they're amoral in that sense. They just care how they can climb in the system. Well, if that system looks like a bad deal to them, like I think it does with Bill Gates all of a sudden right now, and it looks like there might be a possibility of them striving in a different system that will save their ass when this one falls down and crushes them, they're going to jump ship. And that happens when people realize that, oh, their little schemes aren't going to fly because people aren't buying in. People don't trust it. So I still think, as frustrating as it is, I actually think that we are still in the consciousness raising phase. We have not achieved. We have a very much larger population of awakened people, but we're not in the stage to where we have a critical mass that can turn over a population going forward.
And from your point of view, the financial system or regime or cartel is upstream from the universities. Once you change the people...
Absolutely it is. No, I don't know what will happen in the universities, but it is definitely upstream from the universities.
Okay, because
it is definitely upstream.
Not to invoke Yarvin, but Yarvin's completely opposite. He says the universities are where all the power comes from, what he calls the cathedral, and that BlackRock is just following what all these Yale and Harvard graduates want to do, right? The money is following the politic, and the politic is bred within the universities. It's taught there. They get their MBAs there. All of their prestige comes from Harvard into the financial institution.
Yeah, circles exist, right?
Yeah, okay.
Circles exist. So
but you think if we can change the financial system by public pressure, then somehow the universities, the thought leaders, will kind of follow?
No, I think that what will happen is that some will start to experiment with something different instead of seeing pure lockstep. And then the power of the market, the power of people having a seat at the table will start to manifest and start to put it's the invisible hand of the market. It's not an invisible hand. It's the power of millions of people suddenly having a voice or a seat at the table in a meaningful way. And so certainly there is a problem that our entire elite structure has been educated and really programmed. It's not even indoctrinated. We've got to stop saying indoctrinated. They've been programmed into a particular way of thinking about the world. And then they gain elite status because of that. And then so they think about the world more, and they groom certain people to think that way, and then they gain more. And so there is that cycle. And certainly Larry Fink is aware of these pressures. But Larry Fink knows what behaviors he wants to get out of people. Where he got those is kind of immaterial. It's a sunk cost. He now has in his hands literally levers of power that have not been wielded by anybody in at least a century and maybe longer. And so what we see when we look at the universities is zero experimentation. When we look at publicly traded companies, we see zero experimentation. Why are there no anti-woke universities? And people say, what about the University of Dallas? What about Hillsdale? This isn't the same. You don't have the University of any state, for example. You don't have any of these kind of like big gravity centers of gravity.
University of Chicago tried, but then it
No, they put out a wimpy free speech statement. Free speech statements don't mean anything.
Well,
they didn't. They kind of tried. That they tried like with a limp-wristed, like I'm going to write a firmly worded letter approach. What you would see, for example, why is there not a university, let's say in Yeehaw, Texas, doing something different? Why is there not a university in reddest of red states, Oklahoma, attempting something different? And the reason is very simple, because they're effed if they do. And they know they're effed if they do. Which means the power is not flowing upward from them to Larry Fink. It is flowing downward from Larry Fink's access to $20 trillion in assets under management. Like, think about it for 10 seconds. Which thing makes sense? A bunch of fucking dorks are saying stuff, and so Larry Fink, the most powerful man in the world, listens to him? Or Larry Fink has $20 trillion that he gets to whip people around with?
Well, okay, let's enlarge that. Those bunch of dorks from Harvard and Yale all the way down to your local community college, they're all in lockstep, and they are all in your kindergarten, second grade, fifth grade, seventh grade, high school classes. So it's the entire education system is
that's the backup
programming your students, programming the populace to have certain values. And then could it be the case that Larry Fink just comes in and says, okay, I figured out this system. If I just do these words and have them believe in these things, they already believe in these things. I'll just activate that and then gain all the capital from that. It seems like he's already deployed or employed.
But that's not what he's doing. That's not where he's gaining capital. He's gaining capital from manipulating ExxonMobil to sell a bunch of physical assets to PetroChina that he owns trillions of shares of. He's gaining money from manipulating the market using his tool that has gigantic capital behind it.
Yeah, but that tool isn't ESG. ESG is just window dressing.
It is ESG.
Well, is it ESG? Is it just using ESG to advance itself with a glaze of moral, beatitude or something like that? It's just dressed up.
So I think what you're asking about then is the platonic ideal of ESG. Like, there is no platonic ideal of ESG. ESG is a manipulable tool that these people created so that it can mean whatever they need it to mean, so they can manipulate the market and get people to do what they need them to do. How do you know that? And I don't mean how do you guess that. I mean, how do you know that? Elon Musk says something they don't like. Tesla, all of a sudden, the leading electric car company in the universe, loses its ESG score because of its bad social credit now. It's social. The S goes right in the toilet. That's how you can know. There are lots of other ways where this just doesn't make sense.
Wow.
A war that's oddly convenient for the regime's purposes breaks out in Ukraine versus Russia. And immediately, like, the social environment of the world says that Halliburton needs to be rated super high on ESG now so that we can buy missiles, but only the ones that go to Ukraine to fight against Russia, not companies that might be supplying or stocking Russia. That would be the wrong side of the S score. So there's these things that we want to have happen in the world, and we're going to contour the scoring to be whatever it needs to be so that we can carrot and stick companies into it. And it is a carrot and a stick. But what we're seeing now in the past, 18 months, or actually less, 10 to 12 months, is that, well, maybe it is 18, is that the carrot's fake. It's not even a real carrot. ESG does not make return on investment. It actually is a scam. talking to an investment guy the other day. I was talking to Ed Dowd. I don't know if you know who Ed Dowd is. Ed Dowd is a
I think I've
he
seen his
he
channel.
he was high up on the what's that?
I
Did you
think
say
he's got a YouTube channel, I
he
believe.
probably does? Yeah.
Yeah.
He was high up in the chain of command in risk management at BlackRock for a number of years. And he does lots of interesting things looking at insurance numbers right now and what those imply about the how do you say this word
Jab?
in
GAB?
yeah, I'm trying to find a word that you can say that YouTube isn't going to shit its pants about. Yeah, that word. So everybody knows what we're talking about, right? The one of there's like two words you can't say or two things you can't talk about on YouTube. It's the other one.
Okay.
That's not election fraud.
Oh, okay. I thought you were going to go the. Anyways, yeah, go carry on, carry on.
Yeah. So anyway, I talked to Ed Dowd, and he's like, he was actually giving a talk after I talked to him, and he was like, ESG. Somebody asked, "What's the role of ESG and everything you just described?" And he was like, "ESG is just a scam. Besides the fact that it gives them overwhelming amount of control. At the same time, and it's completely arbitrary, they get to make up what it is and change it whenever they want. It also allows them to charge crazy high fees and make crazy investor or broker fees off of every one of their stupid investments. They are dumping money into their own pockets while using implements of control.
Beautiful.
Isn't it? Isn't it? And so his favorite word, I swear to God, is fraud. So everything is fraud, fraud, fraud. And he's just talking about how all the frauds have compiled on each other and kicked further and further out until now we just have world fraud. And what these people are trying to do ultimately is to manage the world fraud so that they can get through far enough to the other side of the fraud bubble breaking without getting, we'll call it a massive blowback when 99.9% of the population realizes that they've been defrauded, which that's approximately the percentage of the population that has been defrauded.
And you see signs of that failing, the carrot stick, or at least the carrot of the ESG.
I do. I see them being very agitated. I see, for example, I think that they had a timeline once they initiated certain things. For example, once the pandemic kicked off and I'm not saying they initiated the pandemic. Maybe they did, maybe they didn't. But they initiated for certain policies with regard to the pandemic, like lockdowns, like shutdowns, like supply chain disrupting, let's just call it supply chain disrupting programs that are meant to suppress the spread of the virus. Once they initiated that set of policies, and that's all policy, once they started initiating those sets of policies, they set a timer for themselves. Tick-tock, bomb is going to go off. People are going to notice. What are they going to notice? I don't know, that we don't have heat this winter. Food is in short supply. Things that they can't get away from noticing. We had so much stock. You can only wreck the supply chains in the actually not even the supply chain, like sometimes the root of the supply. You can only wreck that for so long before people upstream are going to notice. Wait a minute. There's no beans. I was hungry. Uh-oh. What's going on? Then when they start putting out articles like, we have enough gas to get through the winter if we're very frugal and it's mild.
Oh, man.
And it's like, that's the article about Europe, not about Germany
Europe.
Specifically, about Europe.
Yeah.
And it's like, people are going to notice and they're going to be upset. And then they're going to notice also that these bank people seem to just be, and these CEOs of, I don't know, Pfizer and Moderna are just loaded with cash. And where did they get that cash? Mostly from the government. Where did the government get it? From us. Or they just printed it out of thin air.
Yeah,
and
they made it up.
Which is from us, because what that does is devalues our currency to create more currency to give to them.
Yeah.
And so people are going to notice. So they have had a timer running since they initiated some of these policies. And there might have been other policies that they initiated earlier. The border policies are another example. They've had a timer ticking over their heads to where what's going to happen is, and I said just a few minutes ago, we are not at the critical mass of people who understand. But when enough people understand, they are, and I'll spell it for your algorithm, FUCKED, big time. And they know they are.
Okay.
And so they are rushing. And things are not going according to plan. Omicron came into the world. Maybe we should all thank God. Maybe that's Eru Iluvata nudging the world to create another variant that is super contagious, super mild, transcends whatever topic you're not allowed to talk about on the internet. so that it becomes irrelevant and busts apart that entire mass line of action. For example, different things have come. The ball has bounced. The plinko chip has plinkoed in ways that they didn't want and didn't need, and people are actually catching on very, very quickly now. In fact, I think I know another person. One more thing you're not allowed to say on the internet. I have a new friend. I mentioned Ed Dowd. I was talking to Bannon the other day. And,
Ooh.
yeah, Steve.
He hasn't been banned yet. He's still out and about.
I mean, he's got his war room. But I was there. You know, we were doing the in-person thing. We're actually physically in the same room talking to one another. And
smoking cigars?
No, I don't do that. He wasn't either.
Okay.
Bannon and I were talking though, and it is the rate at which people are waking up right now that something is wrong because of forced and unforced errors on the part of what's going on is just astonishing. I was on a plane. Imagine I was on a plane.
Oh, a plane story.
Oh, another plane story. And there's this lady. So the whole internet will say that I made this up and everybody clapped. Nobody clapped. I'm talking to this older lady. She's married to this professor. He's a few rows back. I was like, "Do you want me to change seats so you can sit with your husband?"
She's like, "We've been."
She's
like,
"We've
been social ritual."
Oh, I know, but she's like, "No, we've been on vacation together for like 3 weeks." Like, no. I was like, "Okay, I feel you." And so we're talking, and she's like, "I think Trump is a dictator." And I was like, "Oh God, this is gonna be a rough ride." She's like, "What do you do?" And I'm like, "Yeah, get ready, lady." And so I was like, you know, I study Marxism. I talk about Marxism mostly to conservative organizations. And she was like, "Oh, I don't know almost anything about Marxism." And I was thinking, that's why you think Trump's a dictator, but okay. So we get talking, and Trump, blah, 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 this and that. And it was right after that Mar-a-Lago raid, like the week after, right? And what does she say? She's like, "But I think that raid they did on Mar-a-Lago is wrong. That's not American. That violates his constitutional rights." That's what she said. People are waking up to the fact that something's weird. You know, the dark Brandon's up there screaming at Independence Hall, and he's trying to shake hands with ghosts when he goes anywhere. He's calling out to dead people because he can't remember what's going on. People are noticing that some stuff isn't lining up.
Okay, so there's two ways to move this conversation forward toward alternatives or toward getting people to have a seat at the table. There's the mass, the normies, the people who are waking up, can't get their beans. What do they do? But I want to go back to what you were talking about
the most important thing they can do right now, by the way, is tell two friends.
Tell two friends.
Yeah.
Okay. Tell two friends what?
This seems a little weird, doesn't it? Why don't we look into this? Like, do you know some of the explanations for why things that are happening? Tell two friends. And some of them, it's going to be like, well, you stop talking to that person. About this, at least. You can say friends with them, but you don't talk to them. Okay, not time for you yet. And then you find two friends who are suspicious, and you basically evangelize to them.
That
the world's out of whack, and there are explanations for why the world's out of whack.
Okay.
And if you really want to get, like, it's best if you're informed enough to be able to say that the real problems boil down to the Sustainable Development Goals, the ESG criteria that serve them, and the social emotional learning that they're using to brainwash kids in school.
So sustainability, justice, right? So there's the social and then the financial aspects, basically, broadly speaking.
There's the educational, and then there's really it's the top down and bottom up aspects is what it is. Yeah. The top down aspect is the public-private partnership. That's your ESG. The bottom up aspect is the indoctrinated and brainwashed children that they use SEL to transform into left bots.
Well, NPCs running around.
Yeah. Yeah.
But just to retract to my other question, you said that under Fink, he's got this big pyramid, right? And he's got a bunch of ambitious people. Like
you made no noise for a second on my end. Sorry.
Am I?
Well, it was when you were doing the hand thing. You're making noise now. Sorry.
Okay. So you said, I envisioned a pyramid where Fink has a bunch of people, bunch of financial people, like working up, trying to get power or resources, either money or power, money and power. And you said that eventually enough of those people are going to realize that this pyramid, this Tower Babel is going to crash. It's going to crash. So they want to go somewhere else. How do you develop or design, or what your ideas about an alternative incentive structure for people's ambition?
I think it's already
people who
there.
want to
I
be
don't think
elite?
it's ever gone away. I think we just stopped looking at it.
What is it?
The existing economy. There is still shareholder capitalism in the world. Shareholder capitalism still exists. You can still run a company with the objective of maximizing return to your shareholders. You can still do that.
But it's not unified. So you're talking about a bunch, like thousands upon thousands
Doesn't have
of
to be
businesses.
unified.
Okay.
It shouldn't be unified. We don't want a competing unified thing because that's just stepping out of the frying pan into the fire.
Well, I mean, I'm just thinking that the people who really, really, really want power are going to go toward the unified thing. They're going to go toward whatever is centralized. So I'm just wondering, how do you plug that ambition into something that's not centralized? It seems like there's a certain caste of people who want to be a part of the pyramid. They want to rule the world. And if you can incentivize them in a way that doesn't destroy the world, maybe you're saying that there's no possibility of doing that, that we should just say there's no pyramid here. There's no one world order. There's no...
Well, yeah, that's the thing. I think the pyramid's falling. I don't think it's going to fall. I think it's in free fall.
Okay.
And that's because how do you say this softly? The global financial system is a fraud. And the bill is coming due. And there are people who are very high up in finance who know this, whereas 99+% of the population does not know this yet. And this is the argument that I borrow from Mr. Dowd. And he says, as those people start to realize it, all we're dealing with now, there is no changing that circumstance. All there is making sure that the correct people get blamed and held accountable for it rather than the incorrect people.
Yeah,
and these people work as what their scheme right now, the thing they're working for isn't to uphold the existing pyramid. It is to build a structure where they can deflect the blame entirely. So what you do is you continue to expose, continue to hold to account, continue to embarrass, continue to get them to, like, Bill Gates hasn't broken ranks, but he came out and basically gave this whole like interview speech about how he's freaking out, like this isn't going to work. That's a gigantic signal. That's not a small thing.
But if the entire global financial system collapses, how would there ever be enough capital, virtual or otherwise, to do any sort of shareholder capitalism? If the entire, like if the USD and the Russian dollar,
it's not going to
go
to zero.
Okay.
I mean, there's still capital. People still own factories. People still own trucks. People still own, businesses. People still can work. People still own.
But the method of
computers.
exchange, the money itself, loses all.
Not
if that
all.
loses all, yeah, but if that loses the power that it has, if that loses value, then none of that stuff is going to operate because nobody's going to be able to afford.
Bad time to be a guy that pushes numbers around in that particular currency on a bank sheet then, isn't it? Good time to know how to grow food and wield a pitchfork.
Okay.
So Ed's prediction that he said is that it's going to be 10 years of living hell. Period.
And I'm just looking at the map behind you. It's going to be different layers of hell depending on where you are on that map.
Well, that's how it always goes.
Yeah.
That's the standard privilege argument. But yeah, it's probably going to be pretty shitty for people in Europe. It's going to be fairly shitty for people in North America. It's probably going to be really shitty for people in South America. China is a toss-up. Russia is a toss-up. Africa is probably going to continue on as Africa.
Yeah.
It's like in this like almost sweet spot of not developed enough to not get REKT. Wrecked.
Yeah.
Australia is a prison colony, so I don't even know what to talk about with Australia.
Well, we can get Claire Lim on. You guys can talk about that at some point.
Yeah, we could get Claire on here to just say shit that's wrong, but sound really smart and patient.
I'm sorry,
whatever.
Claire.
I'm
sorry,
not.
Claire. I know you're not, but
I am literally, so I know you're friends with Mr. Nana, and I think you spoke with Mike Nana the other day. And I think that Mike and I vibe on a lot of stuff, but we also like kind of don't on some stuff.
Hmm.
But like, I don't think it's possible for me to be more in absolute consilience with somebody than I am with Mike Nana on rage at the milk toast, lukewarm, better than you centrists. These people are not only useless, they're arrogant about how useless they are. They're like, well, the world seems like it's going very bad, but it's not going that bad for me. And it's because there's extremes on both sides that it's bad for others. And it's like, oh my God.
Okay, wait. So, but you said that
I mixed two people together there that are literally two individuals I was thinking of that are in this category of people. This bourgeois, intellectual, very smart. I have nothing positive to say about a single member of that group of people or anybody who aspires to be with them, to be patted on the head by them, anything. Not a single positive thing. I hope they can enjoy their lives. That's all I got for them.
Okay. So earlier on, you said it's not time to go reactionary. If you're against the centrists and you're against the leftists and you're against the reactionaries, like what the fuck are you talking about then? Like, what is this map?
Have you read the Federalist Papers?
Okay,
we're going back to what the Constitution says. Not even the Constitution. They don't go after the Constitution. They go after the Bill of Rights. Do you know what your rights are? Have you read the Federalist Papers? Do you know what the Federalist Papers are about? Because what we've done is slowly slide in this country into the argument of the Anti-Federalist Papers, out of the argument of the Federalist Papers, which at the time won. So slowly over centuries, starting, let's say, in the 1860s, very significantly, we just won't talk too much about the details of that, we started to slide into an anti-federalist regime. The federal government grew in scope and power, and then later we have Woodrow Wilson, and it grows in scope and power tremendously. FDR. And we have FDR, and it grows in scope and power tremendously. Yeah. Then we had this entire debacle of the 1960s and 70s, and ... And so what we have is a situation where we have slid into the anti-federalist circumstance. So what would be the solution to have it without going into reactionary kings and rulers and monarchical episcopates and all this, the legend of the dickhead who pulled a sword out of a stone and was given by a water cart, so he gets to be king. Like, look, the fucking king right now, by the way, is ESG, is Mr. Great Reset. Maybe we shouldn't have kings. I'm just saying. What are you looking at? You're looking at, what did the Constitution say? It says all these, number 9, Bill of Rights, number 9, Amendment 9, all the power is not here, go to the people. Number 10, all the power is not here, go to the states. In other words, make this shit as local as possible. The federal government should be very small. The state governments, it's up to the states what they want to do. If they want to be California, look at it. It's a glorious place to live. I saw somebody sent me a video the other day of them literally driving like 2 miles across the border in Arizona. I think it was Arizona. Might have been Nevada, but I think it was Arizona. Sent me a video. Him personally driving. It's not like a YouTube. It's like his video, right? He sends it to me. Him crossing the border. Gas in Arizona, like $3 whatever a gallon. Gas in California, literally $2.05 more a gallon. You can, if you were you had a good arm on you, you could throw a baseball from one to the other. $2 a gallon. Yeah, so if California wants to fuck up, let them fuck up. Mm-hmm. But the state governments, that's up to the states. But the idea really should be that the power is going more and more and more and more to the people and less and less and less and less to these, not just the government, but the gigantic bureaucratic apparatus that they've created to attempt to manage large-scale industrial
how do you dismantle that? I don't think that's possible to dismantle without some sort of radical change.
Oh, it will be a radical change, but it doesn't have to be a reactionary change. You can actually be bending directly into the direction of the Constitution by severely curtailing and limiting the powers of these agencies.
Yeah, but you'd have to have a really strong leader to do that. You'd actually, well, again, sorry with the Yarvin. His trajectory is that you get a strong enough person, Elon Musk, go in there, fire everybody, and strip it all down and install people who are competent to do the minimal amount possible. So you'd actually have to have a monarch for a period of time to dismantle the oligarchy. That's what he's saying, is that
Teddy Roosevelt was certainly a powerful person, but he wasn't a monarch. All he did was he slammed the door on the corporations and made sure those antitrust laws got passed through Congress.
Didn't his brother do the exact opposite? He gained all the power and then he installed everything that we have now at FDR.
But that doesn't change the fact of the one guy. He wasn't a monarch and was able to actually slam the door on the corporations when this same problem really arose 100 and change years ago. And it is the same problem. It is that the way that you can circumvent the government in its role of securing the powers for the people is by building corporate monopolies. The power is always monopolistic. Communism always works by establishing monopoly in its own name. All it is a gigantic scam, a gigantic scheme to make sure that they get to run the big monopoly over everything. They call it the dictatorship of the proletariat. And so no, you don't need a friggin' monarch. You need the opposite of that. What you need, and in fact, you don't even need a ruler or a leader. I mean, a president coming in and firing a bunch of people is fine, but it doesn't change the underlying architecture. A Congress, on the other hand, which turns out to be made out of 535 people, not one person. A Congress, on the other hand, deciding to, put forth a bill as of, next Monday, the Federal Department of Education no longer exists.
Yeah.
Oops.
Yeah.
Taken care of. This is a completely different path. And this is the path that was envisioned by our founders. This is something my new friend Steve likes to say a lot, is that if our founders came back and looked at what's going on in the world right now, he would be like, are you people morons? Why we built this not to allow an oligarchy to come into being. Why is there an oligarchy here? Are you people idiots? And so this is, I don't think so. Have you ever heard my analogy of the bat? This is right up your alley, I think.
Like the flippy flappy bat, or the
bat of society, like a baseball bat of society. Okay, yeah. Not like where COVID didn't come from.
No, it didn't.
Different kind of bat, like the kind that you hit a ball with, or if you're on Walking Dead, you put barbed wire around the end of, or if you're like the Addams Family or whatever it was, you put a nail through it. That kind of bat. Let's stop
with what you could do with the bat right there. Okay. All right. Yeah. Okay. I'm just saying, don't go any further with the phallic object. Let's just leave it with the nails on it. So what's your analogy of the bat?
Okay. So imagine that this is a good analogy. I've done like a ton of podcasts on this, but they're all in the private, secret podcasts that I do. Okay. So imagine that the goal of society, like the society functioning, is the idea of keeping a bat upright. Okay. All it has to do is point up to the sky by any means. And that means society's functioning. Okay. There are a lot of ways that you can make the bat point upright. One of the ways that you can, very obvious way, is that you grab the bat and you hold it upright. There's Yarvin's king. And the benefit of the bat being held is that you can hit people with it when they don't do what you want. And you can
hold the person who's hitting people with it accountable.
How are you going to hold the person hitting the person with the bat accountable if there's only one bat?
Well, you set up a system of other bats to hold the people accountable.
No. There's only one bat.
Efficient thing about like the CEO. The CEO is accountable to the shareholders, right? The CEO is effectively a monarch. He can make all the decisions, but that board of trustees and then the shareholders keep him in line.
Powers.
Yeah.
Right. So this is what I'm saying. As a matter of fact, rather than them swinging bats at one another, what the liberal system, what the federal system that we devised in the late 18th century looks like is balancing the bat on the palm of your hand to keep it upright. It takes a lot of energy to move your hand around to make sure it stays up, but nobody can grab it. You cannot hit somebody with a bat that way. It's vulnerable to being knocked over in a way that holding the bat is not. It's vulnerable to perturbations. In other words, somebody's free speech could allow them to agitate for a revolution. It could allow them to agitate for communism. It could allow them to agitate for fascism. They can agitate for those things. That's their free speech rights. In other words, the bat is balanced on their hand, and nobody gets to like, oh, you fascists, whack. That doesn't get to happen. The problem is what's happened is people have grabbed the bat already. And what you're saying is, no, we need to take the bat away from them and we're going to hold it. When the answer is nobody holds the bat. The bat's balanced on our hand. The invisible hand of the market, maybe. It's balanced. We cannot allow people to wield the bat. If Curtis had done more reading than Westphalia or whatever the fuck he reads all the time and had bothered to read anything Chinese, he would know about the bad emperor problem. China's whole history, which is not 5,000 years of a continuous country, that's a communist fabrication. China's whole history has been one wheeling cycle of the bad emperor problem, which is emperors are great, kings are great when they're good, but you only need one to throw your whole pile, the whole country into disarray. Let me give you an example of the bad emperor problem in action, so it's not so abstruse.
Okay.
Imagine that you had a gigantic federal apparatus under the control of the executive branch of the American government. And then Joe Biden becomes president, and in 18 months, the country's a shithole. That's the bad emperor problem. So what do? The problem is that one guy, the executive, has way too much hand on the bat. What do? You take his fucking hand off the bat. That's what you do. How? You dismantle the level of freewheeling control over the administrative apparatus that he has.
Okay. It's questionable how much power Joe Biden actually has, but that
Well,
is
I mean,
another...
yeah, who is the president? Nobody knows.
Yeah.
Joe Biden can't wipe his ass.
But to go back to
he doesn't have any power.
Your path or your plan or whatever is to staff Congress with people who call out the bullshit. The amount of energy it takes to elect one president is tremendous. The amount of energy it would take to de-woke and base, just to use really cringy terms, the entire Congress, you're talking about 6 years because it's staggered elections.
But we don't need a whole Congress. I mean, look how much fucking the what do they call it? The squad, the Justice Democrat squad. That's 5 people. Look how much they did.
Well,
they bent the entire Democratic caucus.
Okay.
There's 5
have they really though?
Yes, they
other
really
than
have.
Optically.
Non-negotiable. They absolutely have. Shit like AOC, Cory Bush, etc. For the exact same reason. These idiots have bent Congress for the fucking same reason that when I talk to the people in charge, no, they aren't people in charge. I talked to people high up in the New York Times a number of years ago, right before COVID. And they were whining to me about Nicole Hannah-Jones. This was if bitch ass Nicole found out about this, she's going to throw a fit. They wanted to get rid of her. They wanted to get rid of her for months and months and months and months before this point when I'm having this conversation in early 2020 with these people. Yeah. And I was like, you want my advice? Fire her. Take it on the chin. Deal with it. They're like, we can't. She has a gigantic Twitter following and will create a PR nightmare by calling the institution racist and saying that the New York Times fired her for racist reasons. This is the only damn thing that these like 5 idiots in Congress consistently do. They call they push really radical crap, and they say everybody who doesn't do it is some kind of a horrible PR thing that they're then going to have to go battle it out with their damn constituents for like the next 6 months and can't do anything productive. You actually don't need that many. Marjorie Taylor Greene is literally one person and has actually she's actually moved the needle considerably. One. Now imagine if you had like 30 of them.
The oversized power of the so-called squad relies not on Larry Fink, but on the education system. They are relying on the sympathies of a mass of people who have been programmed or educated or indoctrinated to believe in the same thing that they believe. So
yeah, but the checks due on that too.
In order for somebody like Marjorie Taylor Greene or Sarah Palin or a conservative or a centrist or a classical liberal to be able to have that footprint, they would have to have activated people. They would have to have the energy of the public. You ever seen a
Trump rally, Mr. Boyce?
Okay, well, that's what I'm saying. That's what I'm saying. So
there are activated people all over this country.
Okay.
By the tens of millions. Okay. In fact, that's what I think. I think that this is another piece.
Well, yeah, but they're all semi-fascist. Our president is calling those people enemies of the state.
Yeah, good. Thank you. That's how you activate more of them.
Okay.
I actually think that Joe Biden, yet again, you and I talked. I voted for Trump. Everybody knows I voted for Trump. I said that Joe Biden was going to be an unmitigated disaster. Of course, I was right. But and I think maybe you did. If you asked me, what was your argument? If you had an argument for Biden, what is it? It's that he's going to give it away. He's going to be so horrible that everybody's going to be like, oh, my God. And so this is a piece that I think gets left out a lot is I don't think people realize because they talk to a bunch of like 20-year-olds who are brainwashed to the point where they're either one way or the other and fairly extreme. But if you talk to anybody else, 90% of them are like, oh, my God, this is going to be so horrible that everybody's going to be like, oh, my God. And so this is a piece that I think gets left out a lot is I don't think people realize because they talk to a bunch of like 20-year-olds who are brainwashed to the point where they're either one way or the other and fairly extreme. But if you talk to anybody else, woke is really losing currency. It's really cringy at this point. Like, they roll out some woke crap and everybody's like, oh God, are you serious? It's cringe. So that giant base of indoctrinated stuff, they don't have that anymore. In fact, what they have is a bunch of people that are realizing they got lied to and manipulated, and they're pissed about it. There are a lot more people in this country who, if they weren't getting whacked off of YouTube or whacked off of social media or Twitter or whatever, or hounded out of their job or yelled at by somebody in their family and not having any idea what's happening, which is very different than getting yelled at by somebody and knowing what's happening, who are way behind people like MTG than there are people who are behind people like AOC. Now, regionally, not true. Rome, Georgia, of course, which is where Marjorie's from, tons of people behind Marjorie. But you go to Brooklyn and you have a bunch of damn Jesse Singal walking around, not knowing his ass from a hole in the ground, thinking, well, if this is so bizarre that all this is still happening, it's so bizarre. How could it be? I don't understand. It's bizarre. It's just weird. It's not fucking weird. It's communism, you asshole. And so there's a bunch of these like idiots in these kind of cushy urban areas who don't know any better. And I will say, I think you asked me a long time ago, would you say that your opponents have false consciousness? And I was like, no, that would be inappropriate. Bullshit. Yes, they do. Of course they do. They don't have the fucking slightest idea what's going on in the world. They think it's 1992 and everything's just weird.
Okay.
Totally false consciousness. I read One Dimensional Man last week, Herbert Marcuse. They are one dimensional man.
I don't know that one. I was just thinking about C.S.
The entire system has conditioned their thought so that they only know how to reproduce the existing system. So they are one-dimensional rather than two-dimensional. They can't see outside of the existing system and see a critical or a transgressive dimension to reality. They can't possibly argue a transgressive belief. Like, for example, I listened to a podcast. It was one of these literally communists interviewing a literally communist education theorist of great fame by the name of Henry Giroux. And the host, if I remember correctly, Samara Taylor, who is an open, when I say a communist, open communist. She's the one that shared the megaphone famously with AOC after Roe v. Wade fell apart. Literal communist, and it made all this headlines. So she's the host, and she's saying about the Mar-a-Lago raid, she's like, well, we know that Trump wants to have done something really bad, and he's about to go down because the FBI wouldn't have done that unless he did something very bad. That's one-dimensional man. That's one-dimensional thinking. Two-dimensional thinking is maybe the FBI is fucking corrupt. Maybe it's fake. That's fake news, two-dimensional thinking. And so their entire program has turned inward on themselves. Completely turned in on themselves. And so I think that the sandbag in their fight, right? The sandbag on their side. I guess it's some kind of phishing thing because it's in all my damn suggested posts on Instagram right now that apparently in Ohio or somewhere there's the muskie fishing, and they apparently put sinkers in their guts so they weigh more when they weigh them and they can win the tournament catching the fish, right? Their sinkers that all these people bought into this is toast. Now, that's not to say it's over, because they have their Hail Mary. And like Tebow or whoever it is that can throw that thing, Mahoney's or whatever his name is, that can throw a football all the way across the field, which is what they need right now, is called social emotional learning. And the receiver, whoever that is called social emotional learning, is going to catch that shit and brainwash the kids. But I think it's actually going to break kids, honestly. But this is why it's so crucial. When I said that there are 3 acronyms you need to know, 3 things that are happening. The United Nations Sustainable Development Goals, that's the target. And then there are 2 mechanisms. The mechanisms are ESG, which is the public-private partnership top-down control. And then there is, which will become a social credit system that will become a complete mechanism of control if it's allowed to. And then there's the social emotional learning. And there's nothing good about social emotional learning. However much you trust it way too much. If you trust it negative 100 out of 100, you trust it way too much. It's really, really devious. It's really, really bad. Nothing good about it. Having read extensively, not just their own writing about it, but also reading what the World Economic Forum wants to do with it, what UNESCO wants to do with it, what the OECD wants to do with it, what USAID wants to do with it. And they write these papers. They put them out all the time. And It is their Hail Mary, which is we're going to brainwash enough kids not to be able to think any other way, using social and emotional manipulation to do it, while gathering reams of data on them so as to build the program of control and the world they're going to step into in a new way, so that it's basically seamless. We're going to do this, and that's their Hail Mary. It's everybody in the whole society turns on it, and you're literally right back to Adolf, who's saying, yeah, you resist us, but what are you? You will pass away. We have your children. They're in the rhymes with Bitler youth.
So it sounds like, just to kind of try to get a bat eye view or echolocation of the lay of the land, that there is economic disaster coming, which is a ticking time bomb. And that stress on the system will not allow the people who are controlling the narrative and also implementing all this stuff to actually have enough time to implement everything.
That's right.
And
I
then
think they're
also
they're running out of time. That's right.
And the time is ticking pretty quick now because of the whole.
I think that they
Russian
already are too slow. Like they already lost. I actually
Okay.
think woke, for sure, by the way, is a zombie ideology. We can talk about that if you want in a minute too.
And then there is the political energy to reinstitute something sane that will actually is already there, is kind of, I guess, disconnected from itself because of all these channels and echo chambers, and it's not being pumped through CNN all the time, right? So that people don't know that other people are thinking the same way. People don't know that other people are seeing that this is crazy, this isn't going to work. That political power, that political will is still, it's still dormant, but it's kind of coming online. And it's going to kind of move forward. So how do you channel that will to implement something? And I guess you're saying go regional? Would that be your
So we
suggestion?
actually are going to retool their program, which is think global, go local. Only we're not really thinking global. We're thinking just in terms of, preserving the globe, but working locally. If they can't implement it in your town because you're able to network and feed yourselves, and your sheriff is like, no, we're not doing this, they have a big problem on their hands. How big is the problem? I'll tell you. I'm reading this UNESCO document. I'm doing a series of podcasts about this UNESCO document about transforming the higher education institutions to be 100%. They say every higher education institution in the world, not just colleges, not just universities, professional schools, trade schools, every higher educational institution, not in the country, in the world, is supposed to be dedicating itself as soon as possible. They don't give a deadline date, but they do have a deadline date implicitly because it's to Agenda 2030, and specifically achieving the 17 Sustainable Development Goals of Agenda 2030 ASAP. Every university they said to rewrite their mission statements, every higher education institution. Okay, but then they say, what happens if every single one doesn't do it? What if there are some that don't do this? Well, then we might not achieve the Sustainable Development Goals. We might not get the goals unless everybody does it.
What are these goals, just in brief, like population?
There are 17 of
declination?
them, which makes them hard to remember, but they're like the complete eradication of poverty in all of its forms. They're like the complete eradication of disease in all of its forms. They're very stupidly aspirational. And
did a 16-year-old write these things?
I mean, Greta might have. I don't know.
I don't know. Okay, all right.
How dare you?
It's carte blanche. Then it's just like we're going to achieve the elimination of poverty. Therefore, give me complete power to go through and take all your money because I'm.
I mean, we can look them up. There's 17 goals to transform our world. They call it.
Okay, yeah. I'm just wondering because he said section 230. So is that like
Agenda
2030?
2030.
Okay.
Agenda 2030.
Which is getting the world population down to 500
everybody's like, oh my
million
God,
or
that's a
something.
conspiracy theory. How can it be a conspiracy theory? They're like, this isn't me riffing. This is
they
what
write
they
these
say.
things. They don't really mean these things. They're just statements.
Yeah.
They're just words on a web page.
Yeah,
right?
exactly. Like there's name one of their documents that hasn't become policy that everybody's bound by it and asking how the hell did this happen. So anyway, they think that everything has to go with them or they're screwed.
Okay.
So if you have localities not going with them, you have, let's say, Pima County, Arizona, like, we're not doing this shit anymore. And, I don't know, I'd have to pick one like Hamilton County, Tennessee. We're not doing this. Or, Ron DeSantis's Florida. We're not doing this.
Mhm.
Or the guy, the Secretary of the Treasury and the Attorney Generals of, say, Kentucky or West Virginia or Utah or whatever, saying, we're not doing this. They have a big problem on their hands. They need massive, massive, massive buy-in. So rather than saying, oh my God, we need this huge reactionary solution, what we actually need is we need a lot of people putting enough pressure on their local politicians, their local circumstances to say, you know what, do what you want. But we're not. We're not going to go along with this. And you start getting that at the level of a handful of states that start to kind of team up and have each other's backs, and they are in bad, bad, bad shape. And you don't have to have some like institute the new Trogdor King of the United States of America to control everything for one generation. Yeah, as if. You give the power to a king, you think the king's going to give it back? No, they're not. That's ridiculous. That's preposterous. That's like saying if we just gave the power to Schwab to transition us through this weird transition in the fourth industrial revolution, that everything will be okay and they'll relinquish power afterwards. Or you give all the power to Stalin, because when the power reaches its zenith, that's when the party becomes useless and we don't need it anymore. We'll just wither away and we'll have a stateless, classless society.
In order to strip America of the federal government, which, how much, I'm sorry, I shouldn't even bring up this number, but it's swallowing like 30-40% of gross domestic production, right? It's just this huge, it's a behemoth. Huge.
It's an out of control monster at this point.
So there's hundreds of thousands of people. There's hundreds of thousands of people relying on that to strip them of their income. What do you do with that? How do you begin to dismantle that? But what you're saying is that it will have to happen. You would have to dissolve that.
I mean, for the temporary portion of time, you actually could have people continuing to work. You just have to limit the power of the thing. And then they can start to be phased out. They don't need to be doing this crap. But if you limit, I'm actually okay with them figuring out what they're going to do with their lives otherwise and doing something more productive. We're not talking about the zombie ideology yet, but I will point out that there's a very elegant argument. Is a very elegant argument for why the government turns out not to be the best. It can do some things that nothing else can do. I actually do believe in blended economies or mixed economies. I'm not a full-blown Keynesian, but I do think that it can do some things that the private sector cannot accomplish, and therefore it has a role. But here's the thing. Everything that it does that can be accomplished by the private sector, it does not just badly, but way worse than the private sector. There's a very simple and elegant argument that's almost too simplistic, but I keep thinking about it, and I'm thinking this is about it. And it's this argument. I heard this at a conference fairly recently, so I want to make sure that it's pointed out that I didn't think this up myself, but that there are essentially three different orientations in terms of how purchasing decisions are made. It's very simple. And so all purchasing decisions have to balance in some way cost and quality. How much are you willing to pay and how good of a thing do you want? When you're the person buying for yourself, in other words, the private sector, in some sense, when you're the person buying for yourself, you care about cost, you care about quality. Therefore, you are going to optimize those competing variables for yourself. And you have both of them are pressures upon your thought. If I buy you a cup of coffee, I care about the cost, but you care about the quality, and now we have a disparity. That's me being a corporation, as a matter of fact. I care about the cost. How much does it cost me to produce this crap? But you care about the quality, so you can put pressure on me to make sure that I'm going to make a high enough quality product. And if there's a competitor, that adds a ton of pressure on me. Vice versa, if you're buying me a cup of coffee, you care about cost, but I don't. So I don't care about cost, but I care about quality. So I'm like, yeah, I want the one with the sprinkles, like the $9 coffee with whipped cream and sprinkles or whatever that I don't actually want because it's the most expensive thing on the menu. Not really, but you know what I mean. But then when you get the government's nowhere here yet. The government actually works in what is called that's a second person purchasing decision. So you have a first person purchasing, this is a second person. The government operates in a third person purchasing decision. They're using somebody else's money, so they don't care about cost, to buy things they're not going to use, so they don't care about quality. Therefore, it's not that they are incentivized to screw it up. It's that they're not incentivized to optimize. They have no actual incentive to optimize other than whatever public blowback they're going to get, which when you're talking about, say, legislators who are going to be elected again in 2 years or 6, there's some accountability there. When you go to bureaucrats who are there as lifers, as they do not have any realistic incentives to get it right unless it's their boss hollering at them for some reason or another. The problem is that they can buy something that's absolutely junk for absolutely too much money because they don't care about how much it costs. They just need to get something to fill the box, and they don't care about how good it is because they're not the one that's going to have to deal with it. And you have to rely on people who are doing the right thing, which, sure, most people want to do that most of the time. I'm not disagreeing. Even in the government, most people want to do the right thing most of the time, I think. They want to do the best job they can. But the matter of fact is, when they just have to make a decision, and they have to make that decision like kind of now, it's going to slip, or they're having a bad day, or they missed a detail, or the corruption came in. Some lobbyist came in and said, blah, 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 and this is what we're going to do. There are lots and lots and lots of reasons that these people are going to make bad decisions that are not optimal to the cost versus quality trade-off that's at the heart of every decision process when it comes to purchasing things. It's a very simple argument that the government, as a purchaser, as a primary purchaser, is in no way incentivized to get that problem right. And so probabilistically or statistically speaking, they will get it wrong more often than somebody who cares more about one or both of the variables. And so what does that tell you? It tells you, should there be no government? No, I think that's ridiculous. I think the government can achieve things that the private sector can't achieve very well. And so, and in fact, regulatory
But it needs to be
functions are one of
accountable.
them.
It needs to be sovereign but accountable somehow.
Right.
So it has superpowers, but also is limited in some
But I'm
respect.
saying that it's okay to just shrink the damn thing down and take the people. You're like, well, their salaries depend on that. Well, let them do something more productive.
I'm just saying they're going to be up in arms about that. Talk about a pitchfork army, and they have all your data, James. I mean, they are listening to everything that you're doing. You're talking
Everybody
about the
has
NSA.
all of our data now, actually. It's a massive problem. It is a massive, massive problem. But no, some rando bureaucrat in the Department of Education doesn't have all my data. And what are they going to do? Leak it? Well, then we'll sue them. You know, we still have some things going for us.
Yeah, well, law is a whole other conversation. But let's go back to what you're saying about woke, and maybe we can bridge it by saying, how did the woke infect the government? How would the idea, the constellation of beliefs and axiomatic principles that we call wokeness perfectly adapt itself to a system like the federal government? Or what would the federal government make it susceptible to a moral structure?
Well, I mean, it's the bureaucratic apparatus is kind of at the heart of that. There are two explanations, that both of which are relevant. One is that, as you've already mentioned, and Curtis Yarvin seems to be persuaded strongly by, and I have obviously argued before, by the way, today is the anniversary of the day that the Grievance Studies affair made the front page of the New York Times.
Really?
Yeah. A 4th anniversary of it hitting the New York Times. It came out 3 days ago, 4 years ago. So 4 years plus 3 days ago on the 2nd, it landed. Today's the 5th. Yeah, mazel tov.
Take a drink. Good work. Eventually that movie is going to be
But the
out,
fact of the matter is, so this is a big point, and we'll come back to the second point, which is the bureaucratic apparatus. We can't lose that one. But the big point is, in fact, that the cultural Marxists, or critical Marxists, whichever one you want to blame, and Rudy Deutschke with the Long March to the Institutions, and Herbert Marcuse quoting him and making a huge point about it in Counter-Revolution and Revolt in 1972, understood something very important, which is that if you capture the universities, and in particular you capture the colleges of education, then you capture the teachers, and if you capture the teachers, you capture everybody else.
Yes.
Right? And so you're creating a pipeline there of indoctrinated people. And Marcuse was explicit. I wish I could quote the whole thing from memory. I could probably find it in let's just find it. I have it like right here, Counter-Revolution and Revolt. I think he says, do the thing.
The right thing?
No.
Oh.
Programmer. I know he's talking about computer programs. He only says program like 6 times. So
program.
Yeah. To extend the base of the student movement, Rudy Deutschke has proposed a strategy of the long march through the institutions, working against the established institutions while working in them.
Yes.
but not simply by boring from within, but rather by doing the job, learning how to program and read computers, learning how to teach at all levels of education, learning how to use the mass media, learning how to organize production, how to recognize and eschew planned obsolescence, how to design, etc. And at the same time preserving one's own consciousness and working with the others. The long march includes the concerted effort to build up counter institutions. They have that's Gramsci, the idea that you're going to build a counter hegemony within the institution that you have. They have long been an aim of the movement, but the lack of funds was greatly responsible for their weakness and their inferior quality. They must be made competitive. This is especially important for the development of radical free media. So blah, 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 getting into the media. But they understood that if you get into the education system, then you can do some crazy stuff. Because everything in a sense is downstream from education. Now, I want to bring this up just as a tangent. We don't have to go into this. But by the way, this worked in education, obviously, right?
Yeah.
What's the program? Capture the colleges of education, then you capture the teachers, then you capture the students. Yeah. They are repeating this right now in all of our religious organizations. If you capture the seminaries, then you capture the pastors, then you capture the laity. And a lot of the faithful don't recognize that this move has been done before. And the mechanism that they used, which is critical pedagogy, which they did in the education field, doubles, if you read Paulo Freire, he's explicit about this, it doubles that it applies to the religious institutions as well. So the same thing's happening to capture faith, where, as Klaus Schwab says, it is not enough to use the intellectual process to change values. For that, you need faith. He has an entire document from 2016 on how you're going to transform the world's faiths to bolster SDGs.
Oh, and good thing that they would never capture the head of the Catholic Church then.
The head of the Catholic Church, who you're not allowed to say in the presence of a Catholic is a Marxist, even though it's super, super, super obvious. The guy's a liberation theologian, for fuck's sake. Capturing the Southern Baptist Convention, which is still in its, boringly protracted civil war, Presbyterian Church of America, yada, yada. And it's not just the Christian denominations. They're kind of at the forefront of our mind here in the West.
Woke Islam?
Yeah, there's woke Islam. Nice. There's woke Judaism. There's woke, you name it. Woke Buddhism. The only thing that there's not is woke whatever they have in communist China. Like, they don't allow that. There's no woke Russia anymore. They don't allow that either. They call us the other F word and leave it at that, and then that's the end of that. Yeah. Super homophobic, but that doesn't matter because it works. And but do we want to be Russia, or do we want to do something better than that? That's the question, kind of circling around our entire dialogue. Okay, so the number one is that you capture the institutions that are the feeders to the public administration apparatus. But then you have to actually look at what's been going on in the public administration apparatus. There's this wonderful book called The Administrative State. It's cheerful, let me tell you, written by a guy named Dwight Waldo in 1948, where he lays out the argument for what can be accomplished through a broad, sweeping administrative apparatus.
Waldo?
I'm not shitting you, Dwight Waldo.
Okay. All right. Not making fun of him. I just
it's like I keep forgetting one part or the other of his name because it's like it can't possibly be that.
The Administrative State.
Dwight Waldo. And it's Waldo like, where's Waldo?
Yes.
And so he created, in addition to this book, The Administrative State. So what do you think grew out of that?
Wait, was this marching orders or a critique?
This
reactionary?
He's a public administration guy. This was a vision for a new method of creating organizing government. Yeah. Was to create an administrative state, a gigantic administrative apparatus, bureaucracy.
Wait, in the 1940s?
In 1948, right after World War II.
Oh, okay, because this seems based on the Machiavellians by what's his name, Burnham, who was writing just a little bit before that, but not reactionary. So you have a bunch of reactionary theory writers seeing the administrative state coming on board, and then this guy says, "No, this is a good thing. This is how we're going to build it." Just to be
no, this guy he's just laying it out. Like this is what an administrative apparatus should look like. And so then he creates this conference. I'm trying to remember what it's called, the Minnowbrook Conference.
Okay.
And in 1968, which turned out to be a fairly fateful year in many regards, at the Minnowbrook Conference, the concept of social equity, which we just call equity today, was introduced. And it said that public administration, which has now grown for 20 years, public administration should abandon its roots of focusing on efficiency and efficacy, and add in a third E, which is equity. And social equity theory is laid out, which is the intentionally, as they said it in their own words, the redistribution of shares to make citizens equal, which is AKA socialism. But of course, now it's got cultural aspects worked in it as well. Yeah. And so the administrative state since the 60s has been directly and openly including as a value on some level or another the idea of equity, the idea of what we now refer to as equity.
Emancipation, yeah.
Equity is the redistribution of shares to make citizens and groups more equal or just equal. And so it's been dedicated to the intentional moving around. So what are we talking about again? Public administration in the administrative state as laid out through the very decisive 1968 Minnowbrook Conference organized by Dwight Waldo, who was the author of the book in the 40s titled The Administrative State. And so what's going on is for 50 years, chief values of administrative organization of the federal bureaucracy and state bureaucracies has been geared toward, well, we have to at least give a mind to equity. They've made themselves increasingly susceptible to those values.
Yeah.
Because the field of public administration, since the 60s at least, and maybe earlier, depending on how you read Waldo, veers off in that direction.
Okay.
And so how did the federal government get captured? Well, it's been bending toward being captured since it was building out what should this bureaucracy that we're building post-World War II look like. And then secondly, the universities are like working overtime to fill those spots with people that are committed to this way of thinking. In other words, you've got the top down and the bottom up kind of happening at the same time. You've got the pipeline feeding in and the organizational administrative structure being built around the people that they're feeding into the pipeline, which is exactly the kind of thing that Steve Bannon is right to say, that if our founding fathers saw this in process, they would have, like Thomas Jefferson would have come back from the grave in 1972, looked at this 4 years into its advancement and been like, what in the living shit are you idiots doing? Well, he probably would have said it with a bit of a British accent and less swearing, more words that nobody says anymore.
Yeah, yeah. So I'm not trying to do a gotcha, James. I'm not
gotcha
confronting. I'm not trying to do a gotcha, but everything you just said undermines your point earlier about finances being upstream from education and bureaucracy. So
no.
Could it not be the case?
That's the public side of the public-private partnership. The reason that the private side of the
could it not be the case that Fink and BlackRock and WF are simply
they're latecomers. They're latecomers.
Exactly. So they're just exploiting the vulnerabilities. Well, no.
They've got the entire corporate world by the nuts.
Because the corporate world is staffed by people who have been submitted.
Fingers wrapped around their ball sack, and it's called ESG. It's a ring, and they're tugging them, and they're like, it's my balls. I'm coming with you. And so they're all going along, and then that's now advanced to where, what was the article that came out just a couple of years ago? Larry Fink and BlackRock constitute the de facto fourth branch of government. He's so influential in the White House. So into this administrative apparatus came this ability to leverage gigantic amounts of this capital to now where in the past year, the SEC has been brought on board with Larry Fink's program. Well, so what you were talking about is building out the system of possibility that certain actors have taken massive advantage of.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm just saying that it sounds like that the ground was primed for an actor such as Fink to come in and create with his reams of people.
Yeah, it's not like everything was fine and then Larry Fink happened. It's not anything like that.
I'm just saying if you just take BlackRock out of the equation, if you take that financial aspect out of the equation, you still have to deal with the bureaucracy and society itself.
Yeah, but if you take BlackRock out of the equation, ExxonMobil's lobbying in the opposite direction. ExxonMobil currently has 3 members on its board, 1/4 of its entire corporate board. Literally, it's 12 members. 3 of them actively believe the fossil fuel industry shouldn't exist. So they actively believe that their own company that they are on the board of shouldn't exist. And where did those people come from? They were appointees in order to make the G score good for the ESG score from Larry Fink.
Okay.
So if you take Larry Fink out of the equation, ExxonMobil's like, what the fuck are you talking about? We're going to go out of business. And they're going to be banging on Joe Biden's door and saying, listen, Joe, why don't you back up the fossil fuel industries a little bit? This solar crap's not working. Instead, they're like, we're dedicated to the future of our planet because there was 9 rings for the mortal industries doomed to die, and now they turn into ring wraiths.
But ExxonMobil is not just bowing the knee to think. They're also being pressured by the media too. So you have the media arm
I don't
of
think
government,
they care
which
that
is
much about the media. The media was instrumental, though. We just read that in Marcuse. That's their plan. Getting the media on side is crucial because then you have fairly low information politicians that are getting swayed around by the media. Which is why the most valuable thing, and I've said this before and I'll say this again, for all the things that Orange Man Good did, you see the Babylon Bee joke today that he came out wearing a shirt that says Orange Lives Matter. Trump comes out wearing a shirt that says Orange Lives Matter. And so anyway, of all the things that Trump did, fake news, just those 2 syllables, is by far the most valuable and important thing that he did because he broke the spell on the media for millions upon millions of people. And that spell is breaking rapidly now because Vox and Vice and Salon and New York Times and Washington Post just can't help themselves and just publish the most asinine things ever, day after day after day after day, to where, the Babylon Bee can easily make fun of them and I can easily make fun of them. And although I died, I don't have a Twitter, I died.
We should talk about that too. But
people talk about me being dead.
There was this.
I read eulogies.
There were eulogies, a hagiography or 2 came along. There were a lot of memes. Hagiography. They saintly you.
Oh yeah, well that's because I am a saint, so that makes sense.
You ascended into the
Saint
radiant ether. Elon bought, or he's buying it, so you might be back. Would you come back to Twitter?
I don't want to be back.
Okay, so how has it been without Twitter then?
Because it's like the weird part is that it's like I acknowledge that I'm disconnected and it's frustrating. Like I don't know what the fuck's going on in the world.
Okay.
All I'm doing is reading these complicated long books and papers now, and I'm not paying any. I'm like, we could have had a very much different and less tense conversation about all this religious stuff that I'm reading. Maybe we can do that.
God.
I have 2 weeks at home right now. So maybe we can have a conversation about hermetic alchemy at some point soon. But
God, okay. I knew it was going to happen. I knew you were going to go in this direction. But anyways,
I'm not going in this direction. I'm saying we can do that in the future.
You're going in this direction.
What I'm saying is
you're going to be in your ice bath and Christ is going to come and you're going to have your little Thomas Aquinas moment. I know
I don't need that.
You're going to have it.
Tell you is that when Twitter kicked me off, it immediately felt like getting cold water splashed on my face. And I'm like, what am I doing with my life?
Yeah.
Like, other than the fact that I'm super busy all the time and that I don't really know what's going on and people expect me to know what's going on, I'm like way better off. I'm super better off. And so people are like, have you made a burner account on Twitter? I'm like, hell no, I don't want to go back to that dump. And then, so it's like, Elon bought Twitter. Yay, you're coming back. And I was even on Truth, which is like fake Twitter, which is not very engaging. And then people were like, I'll pay you to come back. And I was like, I don't really want money that bad. I don't want to be there. It sucks. But I will probably end up grudgingly come back if my account gets reactivated and probably get sucked back into the vortex of it.
What was so sucky and vortexy for you? What was what was it about it as a system that contorted your consciousness in one way or another?
It didn't.
And would you be able to
insane amounts of my time? I don't think it was contorted. Everybody was like, "Oh, Twitter's making James crazy." No, I don't think it was.
Okay.
You want to know what makes me crazy? It's not
what?
Twitter. It's reading another damn document from UNESCO. I get 1,000 pages of documents sent to me a day from things that are way scarier than any dumb shit Jason Stanley from Yale on Twitter. Oh, some dumb shit on Twitter said something dumb shit. I don't fucking care. Here's a 100-page document from UNESCO saying every university in the world needs to be devoted to rewriting its mission statement to the Sustainable Development Goals by next year. Like, a little more alarming. Oh, wow, here's a document from USAID saying exactly the same thing. Oh, shit, here's one from the World Bank saying they're going to pressure companies to do it. Here's one from the World Economic Forum that says this is the only possible future. There are much more concerning things in the world than what some dumbass says on Twitter or some Twitter storm that happens around, like, because some freaking trans lunatic decided they got pissed at you and called in every friend they have on Twitch to come and yell at you and call you a name.
So what was it about Twitter that would make you pay attention to this useless
Twitter is the world's newsstand. It shouldn't be, but it is. Twitter knows what's happening in the world within 8 seconds of it happening everywhere in the world, always. It's the most connected place
But
that has
why
ever
put
existed on
yourself,
Earth.
what is it about it that would make you want to respond to any given event instead of just concentrating on one or two things?
Well, what would cause me to get pulled back into Twitter isn't that. What would get me pulled back into Twitter is the fact of knowing what's going on in the world and being where other people are. It's like truth is okay, but it's really lonely over there by comparison. So there are a lot of structural advantages that Twitter offers that are unfortunate because it's also a communist platform. It's also a CIA operation. It's also 60 to 80% bots. And I don't know what Twitter's even going to look like if Elon gets a hold of it and cleans that crap out. First of all, like, what did I have? 18,000 followers or something? I bet that's going to get whacked down to like 81,000 because they're mostly fake.
Yeah, but those 81 are the ones who matter, right? Do you
feel
think that public opinion?
It was
Okay,
you.
so going back to the bureaucracies and the education system and let's leave the financial system off the table right now. But if the bureaucracies for 50 years, for a couple generations, living memory has been working towards equity or wokeness, and wokeness is just equity with a bunch of like emotional manipulation tactics packed into it, and then the education system has been built and built and built and built and built, is it sufficient for public opinion to say, you know what, that woke Disney film, I'm just not going to click on that. I'm not going to respond to it. I'm not going to watch this thing. I'm going to call this bullshit out. Can public opinion do anything against the public sector? The public sector, I think, and how do you envision that?
I don't think that, like, everybody thinks people are dissatisfied right now. Nobody's dissatisfied yet. We're all still comfortable. We have not yet begun to fight, in other words. I don't think people realize just how pissed off people are going to be if bad things, and I mean real bad things. Inflation's bad, but it's only like intro level bad compared to what's coming. And I don't mean
Biden
like
now.
if the regime wins. I mean the pain that's coming due to their misfeasance up to this point. I don't think people I tell you, the regime is aware of this, but I don't think people realize how mad people are going to be. And if that anger is directed in the directions of the people who actually deserve the blame, it will definitely have an effect.
Okay, well,
I don't
would
think
have
we
to.
are lost.
Yeah,
if we were lost,
okay.
we would be seeing what's happening in China. We're not having what's happening in China. You try to run on the bank, first of all, they turn your COVID app, which you have to have. Do you have a COVID app on your phone?
No.
No, of course you don't, because you don't live in China.
Well,
because you don't live in a totalitarian state yet. So they turn
China's
your COVID
just
app
up the road from
and
me.
they
So
arrest you if you're in public. So that was one thing they did when the people started to go after the banks because their financial system's collapsing too, which, by the way, is a fun wild card in this whole story. Okay, then what? They still went to the banks, even though they were arresting people with their fake COVID crap, right? So what was the news thing that I just saw yesterday from China? Well, they're trying to manage those people with machine guns. If you tried to go peaceably assemble or cause a ruckus, are they moving on you with machine guns? Not yet. What would happen in America if they brought out the machine guns? Probably the same thing that happens when we look at this happening in China and we're like, holy shit, but real, as opposed to like, holy shit, pretend.
Well,
I really think that when I agree with Ed Dowd on this, when the 99.9% realize that they've been defrauded by the 0.1%, and it's not rich versus poor, it's a certain professional class of people. When that happens, very, very, very quickly, things will begin to transform into a different model, because most of the people involved in this are not particularly courageous people, and they will try to prioritize saving their skins and saving what bits of their fortunes that they have that they can. And it turns out there's a really sweet thing you can do, which is say, let the first 100 of them, as long as they rat on everybody, let them go. You know what? No harm, no foul. Keep your millions. Keep your dirty millions. We're not going to hold you accountable. All you have to do is tell us who put you up to it. And they will. They always do.
So I think that public energy, blowback energy on this will be wasted on actually vilifying people and images and saying, this
Oh,
is the
no,
bad
no,
person,
no.
this is the bad person, this is the bad. It's
No,
the
across
entire
this country
system.
where nobody's paying
Like,
attention, we are filling county commissions, we are filling school boards
oh,
with
okay.
people who think differently. Local politics is going to transform very radically in this country
Okay.
in the next 2 to 3 years, 2 to 4
Does
years.
Bannon have a word for this? Because I know he's been working on this for a while.
I don't
It's
know
like
if he has a word for it, but I know he
march
pushes
through
it
the
harder than anybody.
through the institutions, and this is you can see that the left wing media is like, oh no, Bannon's doing his thing. He's staffing up all of these
He's making people
radicals.
want to take actual responsibility and get involved. Yeah. And Bannon's pushing it hard, and I have been involved, not involved like I'm active within it, but I've been in all these I've been in all these conferences that are like Bannon land now, and his posse is what they call it, is always there.
Okay.
Man, his posse, these are people on fire. These are people ready, willing, and able to do stuff. All they want to do is do stuff. They want to get on county commissions.
Do what? Just for
they
the
want to get on
normies,
county
you're
commission.
like,
They want to get on the water board. They want to get
And
on
do
the
what?
school board. They want to get on everything. They want to get involved civically. They want to be poll watchers. They want to be election officials. They want to get involved in the civic process and put a stop to all of the garbage.
and
They don't want
implement
to get
what?
involved in the political process and install some fucking king. They want to get involved in the process and make sure the process promises what it promises. We have
Okay.
a very, very large, very motivated group of people. The War Room Posse is certainly one of these sets of people. Moms for Liberty is another one. There's some overlap and intersect between those because, Bannon has made the wise move, in my opinion, of talking to Tiffany Justice from Moms for Liberty fairly regularly on War Room. So there's some overlap. But these Moms for Liberty, they're 100 and some odd thousand strong now. They're literally going to school boards. They're literally going to county commission meetings. They're literally tackling the primary issues that affect things that moms care about, which are what? Schools and safe neighborhoods. So schools and crime. And they're going after these stupid woke bureaucrats at the local and state levels, and they are getting elected. They are turning over school boards. They are going to school board meetings and making the school boards afraid to make dumb decisions. There's another organization I've talked to you about before, which is Utah Parents United. That's Utah only. They're making grassroots, change. These are happening I go to some states and I say, there's no Arkansas Parents United or whatever state, North Carolina Parents United. And then some indignant person comes up and is like, actually, we have an organization and we call it blah, 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 whatever it happens to be. So they have every state almost, maybe excepting New York, has this kind of thing going. I know there are actually some really active, awake New Yorkers now. It's happening.
Okay. And it sounds like representative democracy is what's happening.
And that's what people want back, and they want back an economy that works within that system. And they are willing to start getting off the couch and coming out. They're like, wait a minute. People can go watch the election and make sure that there isn't cheating going on. Okay, where do I sign up? And they're signing up by the hundreds all across the country, by the thousands, by the tens of thousands all across the country.
Do you see Harvard, Yale, or the New York Times saying this woke stuff is a big headache, and we're not going to apologize because we can't without losing our reputation, but we're going to go back to
under two circumstances.
Classical
Number
liberalism.
one, last, where there's no option left. Number two, when they realize that it's a losing proposition for their ulterior motives. Like, for example, ESG, if they decide that woke is a giant liability, they will divest of woke. And by the way, all the woke activists, any who still listen to you or me or whatever out in the world, need to know they will divest of you as fast as you can freaking blink the second they perceive that you are the liability for them that you're becoming.
So what makes woke a liability then?
Everybody except for the woke hate it. Everybody rolls their eyes. Everybody's sick of it. Once they started doing this crap with kids in schools and in hospitals that everybody knows about now, or virtually everybody, once they started doing it, they lost. That's it. The end. They could have probably chugged along with critical race theory for a while. And I said this back in like 2020. I remember telling Mike O'Fallon in 2020, I got on the phone with him and I was like, I chose critical race theory because there's all these different options. Which thing do I go after first when I start writing this stuff out for new discourses? And I chose critical race theory. And one of the main reasons was because it's just so offensive. They have white this, white that, white the other thing, white logic, white math, white physics, white everything, right? It's just so offensive. White fragility, white talk, white silence, white, white, white. It's so blatantly offensive. So I was like, I'm in. This is the way to go. This will reach people. I chose that one. But one of the things I told Mike on the phone, I said, listen, Mike, queer theory is so repugnant that if they ever make the mistake of going full bore with that in the public, they lose on their own. There's no need to criticize it. It will destroy the whole movement if they put their chips on that. And then I didn't think strategically enough at the time. I'm not that smart. I didn't think strategically enough at the time to think if we debase critical race theory, that's where they have to go. And they have taken all their chips off the table and dumped them on let's cut kids' dicks off. Like, do you have any fucking idea how stupid that is? That is the dumbest thing they could have ever possibly done. And so the very second that this liability calculus changes for a critical mass of the population abroad, they are going to dump the woke movement like a crazy girlfriend.
Okay.
The only reason that they're going to hesitate to the last possible moment to do that, the only reason they're going to wait to the last possible moment to do that is very simple. They know those people are literally nuts and are going to turn on them too. They are trapped. I've said this a billion times. They were like, hey, I have a great idea. Let's raise a dragon. And somebody was like, hey guys, you live in a wooden house. And they were like, yeah, but we'll have a dragon.
I'm sorry to bring up Evergreen, but Evergreen.
How's that doing these days?
Oh, they're now saying that they have had the greatest. They did some sort of Biden rhetoric turn where they say this has been the greatest uptick in enrollment in however many decades, because like the enrollment's so low that like they had like 100 student comes on.
Yeah.
So percentage wise, like, oh, it's a huge jump. It's a huge jump.
And so people are like, yeah, that's real, right? No, of course they're not. People are just like, all, screw that. It's all
spin. Yeah.
See, this is the fundamental thing. I just put out an episode of my subscriber only podcast on this today. I recorded
What's it called?
Like so long ago I can barely remember it. What's that?
But plug it.
It's called James Lindsay Only Subs.
Okay.
So you have to be a subscriber to New Discourses, then you get access to it because it's
and you have to submit, right? Is that what sub means?
No,
only
it's
your
subscriber.
Subs, no DOMs. Oh, okay.
No,
sorry.
Because it's only subs is like only fans.
Yeah, I know. That's why I brought up the Dom sub thing, because maybe it's just like another.
That'd be weird, and I'm not weird.
Well, okay.
All right. Well, I'm weird, but not that way.
So what was your special?
Assad is not my flavor of weird.
Okay, no.
Although I was talking to a guy at this thing I just went to in LA, and he was saying that the entirety of the feminist movement is predicated off of Juliet from Marquis de Sade's, what is it? The Philosophy of the Bedroom or whatever that he wrote?
It might just be called Juliet. But anyway,
is Juliet a different work? Because he has like the Philosophy of the Bedroom. That's like one of his books.
Let's not dip into feminism and sadomasochism right now. Let's keep it
he would be the sade part of the sadomasochism.
Yeah,
yeah.
And you're just looking for subs.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So anyway, we've gone tangential. We got to come back to the orbit. What the fuck were we talking about?
We were talking about something.
That's true.
We should probably take some questions though.
All right, we can just transition to questions. I had a point, but it didn't really matter.
Well, you were talking about CRT, you focused on CRT, and then they put all their money behind CRT, and then queer theory.
Queer theory is offensive. It's going to destroy themselves. Nobody can buy into this. Not for long. Once the detransitioners start getting their voices more and more elevated, which is already in process, this thing is going to, it's going to hit them like an atomic. That's what I got kicked off Twitter for. I got kicked off of Twitter for poking that bear. So many people have been kicked off of Twitter. Normal, everyday people who don't do anything offensive are getting kicked off, off of Twitter for touching this bear.
Yeah.
You can't touch the trans thing. Weird Al will come and get you thrown off Twitter. Not Weird Al Yankovic. Weird Al Caraballo.
Oh, don't say the name. Don't say Keffelt either. First question from Return to Reason. Thank you for the super chat. Thoughts on Peterson's conservative manifesto? His defense of institutions is laudable but catastrophic, calling them good and functional. Important line on the right, controlled versus real opposition. Have you been watching Peterson? He came out with a slew of message to this person and that person.
No, I stopped watching Peterson some time ago when he made some like, screw you, woke moralists. And I was like, oh my God.
Okay.
I didn't pay. I was vaguely aware of Peterson, but I was vaguely aware of Peterson because I was on Twitter. And so I don't know what Peterson's doing. He hooked up with the Daily Wire, and I'm like, hey, he's corporate. I don't know.
Okay.
And
But with regard to conservative are institutions functional and good? Are they essentially good? Or are they essentially trend corrupt?
they trend corrupt, but they're necessary. So that's why, like, when Benjamin Franklin came out, he was like, it's a republic if you can keep it. Well, your institution is only going to be as good as how well you keep it. You got to tend your garden.
Yeah.
Or
And
otherwise it's going to get full of
that
weeds.
is the political activity that you're involved in and plugged into.
Yeah.
Is
So
getting people, raising awareness, and then getting them activated.
I think that we really should be cleaning up, mostly shrinking, also when it comes to government apparatuses, but we should be cleaning up our institutions and making sure that they work to serve what they're supposed to serve in the United States of America, which is the people.
Aren't they serving people by doing equity, by redistributing
No,
things to
they're not. They are not. Equity harms everybody that's involved in it. Every redistribution scheme,
Not
with
the bureaucrats.
short exception list of things where there is a overwhelmingly clear injustice involved that limits access, actual outright discrimination with intentionality behind it, disability. These things limit access in a way that everybody can see is unfair, and we actually do prefer to have equity to deal with those situations. Virtually nothing else.
Okay. Too many points. I'm just going to let you talk. So super chat, £2. This actually live. Anyway, late here, night people. Thank you very much, Andrew Joyner. We're going to go scroll down to a question.
It is live.
Here.
That's the answer to that
Did
question.
you see that Joan of Arc, the woke Joan of Arc, or the trans Joan of Arc? The opening salvo is how trans people are sacred and divine. It's so cringe.
We're going into the hermetic thing if you take one step further into that. I actually think that the trans thing is actually a hermetic rite that they're dragging our children into through their demonic misuse of. I'm not even going to like crap on hermeticism. I know Christians would want me to because it's like a heresy and all this. I'll even let it just be one of the grand spiritual traditions of humankind in history for the moment. And they say in their own writing, because I've been reading it, that you can use this for good or you can use this for evil. And I think that Hegel and Marx, et cetera, have been using it for evil, and it has been for 200 years.
By hermetic, you mean Gnostic?
The way that they're doing
too?
What's that?
Is that a synonym for hermetic is Gnostic?
No, they are cousins. They are close cousins. The combination of the two and some other things in Europe in the Middle Ages was called the esoteric religions. So they are both esoteric religions. They actually have quite a bit in common. Their creation myths are fundamentally different. Their orientation toward the world and the objective of practice are fundamentally different. So they are not the same.
And
Hermetic
the trans cult
is,
is
based off
manifesting.
Of the writings of a handful of writings, but primarily the writings of a character
Hermes
that may or may not be
Trismegistus.
real, called Hermes Trismegistus, the thrice great. Yes. And the primary text is the Corpus Hermeticum, and it's 17 chapters, just like the 17 Sustainable Development Goals,
Oh,
just
do they
like
have
the
a section
17 contradictions
232?
of capitalism that Marx found, just like the 17 generative themes that Paulo Freire says will conscientize somebody, just like that they intentionally signed the Constitution on September 17th. Oh, wait, that one was weird, but it's true.
Okay. We're going to have to do another one of these next week if you have time
But anyway,
to get
we
into
don't
that
have to go into
hermetic
that.
stuff. Okay.
Let's skip to the next question.
So super chat, Tom
And my wife wants me
Riley.
back at some point.
Oh, that's
Still
nice.
married, believe it or not.
You're doing great work. Great work,
Yeah,
James.
knock on wood.
Have you read None Dare Call It Treason by John Stormer or Tragedy and Hope by Carol Quigley? As it seems you figured out what Yale and Harvard were up to in late 19th century with philosophy.
No, I have not. But Quigley, I have a lot of positive words for, although I haven't read more than a few paragraphs of his writing. He comes up a lot in my circles, and it seems to be that he's kind of spot on. I would also recommend for people looking for... Go ahead, sorry.
Was Quigley the guy who wrote that book that you spoke about with me previously about how the academia lost its theology department?
No, that's John Henry Newman. I'm trying to see if that book is in
You're
the
not
room,
looking.
and I'll hold it
He's
up
not
if
looking
it
at his
is.
wife. He's looking at his bookshelf. His
Yeah, I'm
wife
looking at
comes
my
from
bookshelf.
the left.
I mean, I really do. I have a bookshelf
Oh.
over there. So it is, I don't think it's in here, but that book is called The Idea of the University by John Henry Newman.
Yeah. Sorry, so
And so it's a
what's
different book.
Quigley's contribution or his?
I don't remember what it's called. I haven't read Quigley yet, but I need to
But
because
he
it
keeps on
keeps
coming up.
coming up and he keeps
Why?
proving to be valuable and right.
Okay.
I would add that people should probably, if they're interested in this kind of line of thought as to what the so-and-sos were up to, they should probably be reading Anthony Sutton as well. He worked for the Hoover Institute until they crushed him because he got too close to something. And in particular, you might want to read his book, Skull and Bones, about the Bonesmans, which is a secret society. And the Constitution was signed on September 17th, and that's not really weird or Freemasonry at all. By the way, the Freemasons were founded in 1717, if you didn't know that.
Hey,
I'm
James,
just bringing up a lot of 17s here.
have you heard of Catherine Austin Fitts?
I have, but I can't remember why I've heard of Catherine Austin Fitts. This is a definite yes, I have, but I don't remember.
Okay. Somebody asked me to have Ryan Chapman on. That's another YouTuber. I will take a note of that.
I think I've heard of that person.
Ryan Chapman.
It's a name I recognize. This is somebody I think I would have known who it was if I was still on Twitter. I don't watch YouTube though, except for this. Like my algorithm's loaded up with shit that is not in this realm. Although I did end up stumbling into
waterboarding, like
self channels, and now it's all this hermetic shit too. But my algorithm is
breaths.
like knife
breaths.
and sword making, wood turning, physics, math, people who go around and taste strange foods and particularly fruits around the world.
What's the sexiest
magic.
thing about math?
What's that? What about math?
Sexiest math fact.
I mean, they're kind of a lot. I don't know about sexiest. I don't know. Okay. There's a very pertinent math fact, but we don't want to go off on another hour-long tangent.
2 + 2 = 5.
No, that I think that what the Hermeticists or particularly Hegel and Marx are doing is a Fourier series on the idealized society. They have the idea of the idealized society in their head, and what they're trying to force on the world is the truncated Fourier series, the partial Fourier series of the ideal world. And they have however many variables, and 100 million people dying gives them another degree of precision in their thought. And so if they get enough, they can approximate the utopia by drawing it in the Fourier series. But that's a long discussion I don't even know how to present.
Okay. Somebody asked, and this is a while ago, have you and Ed done an interview together, and where would you find it? I don't know who Ed is.
Ed Dowd, and the answer is no.
Oh.
I met Ed at this for the first time, and we've chatted on social media a few times, and I met him in person this past weekend, and we talked twice for a modest amount of time in each case. Okay. And then he gave a wonderful hour and change long presentation that I listened to.
So connections have been made, but you guys haven't produced anything.
Yeah, I can text him if you want me to text him.
On that note, do you do interviews yet on your secret sauce podcast, your only subs thing?
No, I don't do interviews on any of them. So my 3 podcasts, I have 3 now, are the New Discourses podcast, and that's the long form one. Most of them are pretty long. We all know what that's about. It's just my general content. It's usually me reading their papers or pieces of their books and explaining what I think they mean or where we are in society is in reference to those things. I'm doing a series right now based on that 100-page UNESCO document called The Strange Death of the University. Part 1 just came out. It's called The Red Thread. That's language I stole from them. They said that the red transformation is the first line of the document is transformation is the red thread running through all of the sustainable development goals. And I'm like, holy shit. Okie dokie.
Nice imagery.
Then the next, so that's like the preface or whatever. And then there's the foreword or introduction, whatever the next section thing is, and it's just about how we all need to turn our attention back to Herbert Marcuse's One-Dimensional Man. So I went and reread One-Dimensional Man in the meantime, so I'm doing that anyway. And,
do you admire Marcuse?
No.
Do you loathe him?
I mean, I find him a pretty difficult to like person. I mean, he's dead. It's kind of a waste of time to loathe somebody.
Well, yeah, but I mean, do you admire him for being able to articulate something so viral?
No, I don't.
No. Okay.
No, I want to. If I could go back in time and kick him in the balls, I would.
Oh,
I wouldn't hesitate. I would kick him in the balls so hard I break his pubic bone.
You could probably do that with all the waterboarding that you do to yourself. You're probably
That's right.
pretty lean. Super chat. Okay. Adam Keeney is reading Hegel and the Hermetic Tradition, and he can smell Lindsay's cologne on every page. I don't know if you know that book. I don't know that book.
Hegel and the Hermetic Tradition. Is that Glenn McGee?
I don't know. We would have to
Let me look that up.
Glenn McGee. That's a great name.
I've read some of that, if it is. Yeah, that's Glenn Alexander McGee. I have read some of it, but very little of it. I only recently acquired a copy, so I had read excerpts of it from other sources, in particular from Steve Coughlin, who I also met this week. Steve Coughlin is an interesting and very, very smart guy that people should be paying more attention to. His website's called Unconstrained Analytics. And
he's a blogger then? Mostly essays and stuff?
No, he's a former intelligence officer.
That sounds juicy.
He's smart.
Somebody, Toph, T-O-F, very intense profile picture, says, love your work, James. Just indispensable. How would you respond to critics who would accuse you of abusing language by diluting the label of Marxist to apply to concepts outside economic theories?
I think that those people don't understand what Marxism is and got hooked on the wrong thing, and sucks for them.
What is the limiting principle for your language uses?
I published a 7,000-word essay on that yesterday.
Okay. But let's abstract from Marxists. Like, what's the limiting principle? When you go after groomer or Marxist or something, do you still want to retain the meaning somehow? Or do you...
Not in a strict, weird, goofy academic sense. No.
Okay.
I want to go after when I use a label, I'm not like classically an essentialist, but I want that word to capture the essence of what's going on. And so why do I call people who are grooming groomers? Or even, I'm playing a little there, but the reason is because they're groomers. They're essentially engaging in the psychological grooming of children. Okay, so that's why. And I'm playing a little bit there because they decided that racism can be structural, so I decided that grooming can be structural. If there's an entire apparatus that upholds a small number of people grooming, but most people aren't directly involved in grooming, aren't they structurally groomers? According to their own logic, yes. And I do believe in that point from Lindsay is you should hold your opponent to their own standards. But that's one thing. What about Marxism? No, okay, I think that if you've read, and I get this, I get why people are off. I get why people misunderstand Marxism as an economic and social theory primarily and only, and that we should reserve the term Marxism to mean Marx's economic theory. And the reason is because Marx's economic and philosophic manuscripts were not published until like 1937 or something like that. So much later, right? Or 1927. They were much later. They were written in 1844, but they were not published until the 1920s or 30s. I forgot exactly which date.
What were this body of work about again?
Marx's economic and philosophic manuscripts lay out Marx's entire kind of substratum of ideas before he wrote the Communist Manifesto. It is an explicitly religious document. It, of course, talks about economics. It goes after Adam Smith viciously for a section or two. But he talks about the ontology of man and the telos of history in tremendous detail. Well, that's a religion at that point. And so everything he writes follows from that structure of his philosophy. Then they were published. And then what happened in the critical Marxist period in the mid-20th century, 50s and 60s primarily, is a lot of that early Marx got reincorporated back into the corpus of how Marx was to be understood. So I get it. From 1848, when the Communist Manifesto came out, until 35-ish, 6, whatever it was, 8, whatever it was for the economic philosophical manuscripts, Marxists didn't know that was how Marx thought of this stuff. And so they were chasing an economic and a theory of political economy, ultimately, but a socioeconomic theory. I see Marxism as a religious logic into which different concepts can be plugged in. And what we call, when I use the term classical Marxism to distinguish, what we call Marxism or classical Marxism is when you believe that which creates man, that which is the production of man, is economic conditions or economic materialism. Then you plug in that subroutine within the broader program. And then that's the thing people call Marxism. When you unplug that and say that it's cultural hegemony that does it all, you plug in that subroutine, you get what we call cultural Marxism. When you unplug that and you say it's the existing terms of society, you plug in that subroutine, we get critical Marxism. When you unplug that and say it's, these divisive identity politics where we have stratified societies based on, say, race, sex, gender, et cetera, plug in and you get the various identity Marxist theories like critical race theory, queer theory, et cetera. Who gets to have the power to make meaning in the world, to make sense of the world? Postmodernism. Unplug that subroutine and plug in the sustainability crap, and then you get the World Economic Forum. But it's the exact same operating system. It's the same Atari with different cartridges sticking in it. So I don't name Marxism after the cartridge that's the first cartridge, whatever that was, Donkey Kong or whatever the hell the first was, Pong. I guess it was Pong.
It was
I don't
Pong,
name it after the first cartridge. I name it after the machine. And so I think that what would I say to my critics was the question is, you have missed the whole point, and 100+ million people have died because people have missed the point. Stop missing the point.
Point well taken. James, in this secular society, where do we draw our ethics? Oh God, this is like a 3-hour conversation. Seems like we are living in an ethical vacuum. What has happened to responsibility, and how do we get it back as a value?
We draw our ethics from me. What I say is ethical, and that's
Lindsay Hegemony.
Sorry, that was something else. We don't do that. We very much don't do that. We most definitely don't do that.
First principles, then.
This is a very long conversation.
Yeah.
And if I understand right, wasn't Crocoduck in the chat again?
Well,
if so, you should watch Crocoduck's series that he's been putting out on his channel about the kind of foundations of philosophy. I think he called it the naturalist nuke, to go after the woke thing particularly. But if you watch that, he and I agree rather significantly on those matters. And so you can he explains how he believes that ontology, epistemology, and axiology kind of all come from the same place, which has something to do with observation. And you should just go watch his videos on it. And then you can spend 3 hours with Crocoduck instead of 3 hours with me, doing a bad job of re-articulating roughly the same argument.
Oh, I don't know if we're going to get through all of these, and we should probably wrap it up pretty soon. Let's get 6 more minutes.
Like crazy. So.
Yeah, me too. If God, okay, if God is something of a description of the vastness of reality, seeking truth as a means of coming to terms with reality, this craziness seems to be a means to see reality only as your own perception, which is hell.
Yeah, well, I mean, that's not wrong. It's I was talking with somebody today, and I don't want to steal his stuff and put it out there, so I don't want to say what he said. But it's really a matter of capturing the framing of how reality is understood. And this is what people have been talking about and circling about. I wrote an essay on it at Christmas a couple of years ago, arguing that really what we're dealing with is a construction of pseudo-realities or false paradigms of legitimation. And this is why these centrists who just want to be above everything are such a big problem, because what they want to do is be above anything that might call out those paradigms of legitimation. That's where these strivers are both very dangerous and can become very useful. They're trying to strive within the existing false reality, the hyper reality, the pseudo reality, the paralogical regime of legitimation, whatever terms from the philosophical literature we want to apply to it.
This is a related question, Super Chat. Do you think tech companies will start telling their engineers to not get the right answer in math because they'd be upholding white supremacy? Do you think wokeness is actually going to affect the bridges?
No, not like that. But yes, it will affect the bridges, but not like that. What will happen is you will have people who are in various protected categories, which might be based on identity if the current paradigm continues, but it might be based in being useful to the regime if it descends into what it's eventually going to descend into if it continues on its trajectory. And those people will be wrong, and they will not be allowed to be told that they're wrong, so they will not be corrected, because that would be racist, or that would be sexist, or that'd be transphobic. So you can imagine Weird Al making a big fuck up and somebody having to tell Weird Al, you did this completely wrong, and then everybody knows that Weird Al is going to ruin their lives with their trans-tifa bullshit, and so you don't tell Weird Al that they did something wrong, and all of a sudden, the bridge falls down because Weird Al got the calculation off by 2 zeros or whatever, and nobody wanted to say that they're wrong because that would be transphobic. And that's where this always goes. This is why Chernobyl melted down. This is why the Chinese economy is teetering on collapse. This is what happens when you have this kind of a totalitarian regime. So it's virtually guaranteed, if we continue down this line, that this will occur. I think we're going to see it massively in medicine, and I've called it medical Lysenkoism and talked about it extensively.
That's dangerous stuff.
Very dangerous. Unstoppable right now.
Last question of the night. If you had to pick a favorite math proof, what would it be?
I was a combinatoricist, so I trot one out a lot. I have a lot of proofs actually that I like.
Wait, so you're like mashing things together? You're like a combinator.
That's not exactly what
combine.
That means.
Kiss.
I mean, there's a lot of elegance, for example, in the Eulerian, is it Euler? No, it's Euclidean proof of the infinitude of the primes. There's a lot of elegance in that. I like that one. I used to trot out that the square root of 2 is irrational from memory in very short doses. I think that one's really, really beautiful. But as a combinatoricist, I really like this one, which is the one that I give. It's a very simple one. I'm not going to get into the Fibonacci sequence or all that like I could with the dominoes or the what are they called? The Lucas numbers, where you use the circular domino arrangements. I really like that. It's really fun. But people are like, well, what in the world is a combinatoricist? What do? Mash things together or make potatoes? What do you do? No. And so what it is that you show that when you have an identity, which is that you have two expressions with an equal sign between them, that both sides of the identity count the same structure in different ways. That's a combinatorial proof. And I always think that these are really fun. That's why I did my PhD in combinatorics, because I thought they were fun. I knew they weren't useful particularly.
Like Sudoku.
I just think that they're fun.
Like a puzzle. Yeah.
Yeah, I like the puzzles. And so a lot of people don't know that the perfect squares and the odd numbers have a particular relationship between them. And that relationship is that the nth perfect square, so n squared, whatever n is, if it's 5 squared is 25, right? So if n equals 5, it's 25. It turns out that the perfect squares equal the sum of the first n odd numbers. Okay, so 5 squared is 25, 1 plus 3 is 4, plus 5 is 9, plus 7 is 16, and then the fifth one is plus 9 is 25. Yeah. Okay, so it turns out that if you add up the consecutive odd numbers starting with 1, n of them, then you get n squared. And how do you know? Well, imagine that you have a square arrangement of tiles or balls or blocks or whatever. Yeah. N on a side. By definition, that is n squared, right? That's the definition of n squared. So you know that the n squared side of the identity counts that square arrangement, n by n arrangement, checkerboard or whatever you want. What about the other side? Well, you start with the one in the corner, that's 1, and then there's one next to it and one below it, and then one in the corner, right? And that's, so you add 3 more to it, and that gives you 4. What's below that? There are 2 below that, 2 on its side, and then 1 in the corner. So it's 2 times 2 plus 1. It was 2 times 1 plus 1. Now it's 2 times 2 plus 1. Then what do you have next? You have a 3 by 3 square. How do you get to the next one? There are 3 below it, 3 beside it, and 1 in the corner. So it's 2 times 3 plus 1. But that's the next odd number. You have 2 times 1 plus 1, 2 times 2 plus 1, 2 times 3 plus 1, 2 times 4 plus 1. And that's how if you think of the checkerboard, instead of it being n by n, you think of it as the corner, and then the L around it, and then the bigger L around that, and then the bigger L around that, until you go out n layers, you get the same checkerboard counted by 2 different means. And so that's a mathematical proof that n squared equals the sum of the first n odd numbers. And that, I think, is kind of cool. And it says, people hear that and they're like, wow, you're right. Combinatorics is so fun. I'm going to go major in that. I'm just kidding. Literally, nobody has ever said that. They give me the same exact look that you just gave me.
I would need to see the graphic. So there's probably a YouTube video that just like shows it.
I did it with my finger, Benjamin.
I know your finger isn't a GIF yet.
I can't draw on your YouTube.
James Lindsay, it's been way too long. Great to have you back. Thank you so much for joining me. Hopefully we can get back into it about the Hermeticism and get into your weird, funky, magical reading.
I just started reading their books. And I'm like, holy shit. Okay.
17. What's the proof of 17? So thanks.
No, we're not going to do that. It's just a prime number. It's okay.
It's just a prime. Say goodnight to the folks at home.
Good night, folks at home. Have a good night. I'm also